who are the ones that are participating, or the members of the subcommittee. However, I would like to welcome on board this meeting. They are our valuable stakeholders, so they can hear the decisions and hear the discussions that the members are going to have. And of course, it allows them to actually put into context when they do read the actual reasons for decisions that will be published later for each of the items that have been decided on. They'll be able to put those in context. I'd like to welcome you and the members of public who might be listening to us on all our platforms. So we'll deal with the first matter. Can I just request members, just again, sometimes we do make this mistake. The items that are recommended, normally recommended to ER, are for recommendation to ER, which are not for decision by the committee. Is that for those items, and that it may not be necessarily this particular one, but I think in the mains, item 12, 13, and 14, those that would be of concern. I'll remind members again that when it comes to those matters, whatever numbers that may be referred to in the document, we cannot make pronouncement on those numbers, so it makes it slightly difficult to engage with the documents, but we have to understand that until the energy regulator makes a decision on the numbers, those numbers cannot be made public. But I will actually again emphasize this. I know that I personally have made a few boo-boos in the past where I may have mentioned a number before the ER, actually before the matter comes before ER, which is not correct. So if we can just think about that, members, as we provide your input, that, and also members of staff as well, remember the items that are going before the energy regulator for a decision, that those numbers cannot be mentioned on this platform at this stage. Thank you. With that, Mr. Mavuso, can I get an understanding who's presenting item 6, and if we can proceed, please, with item 6.
Item 6 will be presented by Thabo, but here I just want to, I see Brian's hand is up.
All right, Mr. Chotler, you want to say something before?
Yeah, probably say maybe the same thing that I'm going to say that is what Mr. Mavuso wanted to say. Chairperson, you know that it's just a process issue because normally what happens is that when we do the consultation paper on the guideline, we wait for the decision on the revenue and the decision on the ERTA. And that actually takes time and it makes us to be very late for the municipality ref applications themselves. So this year we have changed the strategy. We are saying that because normally when we consult on the guideline, it's really more to say on the principles and the approach that has been adopted by NERSA, not necessarily the final number itself. So we said, because we've got ESCOM's application, let us use that application as it is without any changes to it, and then consult on the approach that is going to be followed in terms of getting to the final guideline number. And then as soon as the ESCOM revenue and ERTA has been approved, then we just make that adjustment to the final number, to the guideline number that had been used, which was purely what ESCOM has applied for. That would actually buy us time to make sure that at least we are not late and being accused of approving municipalitarianism late. But I think Kutabu can take us through the details of the guidelines. I just wanted to explain that it does, so that doesn't cause confusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sichotlo. Mr. Mavuso, were you going to raise the same issue?
Not exactly, Chair, but I just wanted to, maybe highlight to the members that this consultation paper is being considered like under the context of a new developing context where there was the court order, which basically says that tariffs now must be based on cost of supply. And in this regard, Chair, we are ready. We are working with the municipalities in terms of, firstly, of us and to them to expatiate whether they can actually, they are ready for this. And I think there should be a report somewhere, in terms of the process that we are undertaking. And also, we said we will help them during the deform, process. And also, I think we're a bit equipped because, that NGO, Sustainable Africa, that has been helping us in dealing with this matter. I just wanted to highlight that this consultation paper is basically considered under a slightly different context, especially after the court order. Thank you, Chair. Thabo can come in and do the presentation.
Mr. Chala, before you present, can I recognize Mr. Pokula?
Thank you, Chairperson. I may be lacking a little bit on the interpretation of the law, so I need colleagues to assist. When a court pronounces that you can't use a certain method and you continue to use it, would that not be seen as a contravention of the court order or the court decision?
Thank you, Mr. Pokula. I'm really hoping that the colleagues will premise this presentation properly. We do have 11 months. We might be down to 10 months now. And I'd like to believe that Mr. Murati will talk to that because there is an item which is in a closed meeting that deals specifically with this court order. But we can still use it in the next 10 months, but before and after that, we'll be forbidden to actually use it. But I think Mr. Murati will provide a better context later. But I think as Mr. Chabalala, as we present this particular one, please deal with this issue as well. Madam Maseti, I saw your hand shoot up and then shoot down. Are you covered?
Chairperson, I will ask the questions after the presentation.
After the presentation.
Colleagues can do it. Yes, thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chabalala, can you kindly present this, but also take into context, we need to take into context the court order, and also as Mrs. Chotla has also premised this, if you can also indicate the implications of that departure. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson, members and fellow colleagues. So the purpose of this submission here is to request the subcommittee to approve the municipal tariff guideline increase and benchmarks for the 2023-24 financial year. And just to provide some background, members should note that although historically the energy regulator would approve these guidelines and benchmarks annually, this time is actually the last year that this approach will be used. And this, in fact, is as a result of a higher court case that was brought about by Nelson Mandela Bay, business chambers, and others. So just in a nutshell, in this case, these chambers approached the court and requested that they declare this guideline and benchmarks approach that is used by NERSA to set municipal tariffs as unlawful. Following some court hearings, NERSA and the applicants then decided to settle on the matter. So as part of that process, this approach was then declared as unlawful and states that municipalities should migrate towards actually using the cost of supply study methodology as an approach. And this is by 31 July 2024. But it's like Mr. Gumet, as you had indicated, I noticed that as part of today's agenda, this court case will actually be presented. So I will allow for that process to unfold as I believe that even further details will actually be disseminated from that agenda item.
Thank you. Are you done with the presentation, Mr. Chabalala?
No, I'm not yet.
Okay. Please proceed.
So, yes, apologies for that. So already, Dr. Sechotlo had already touched on this to say that usually in setting of these guideline increases and benchmarks, normally you find that this process actually depends on the Eskom revenue process being finalized, and then subsequently the Eskom retail tariff structural adjustments, or ERTA in short. So this has actually always resulted in the guidelines being finalized and published very late. which makes it then impossible for municipalities to finalize their budgets by 15 March as required by the MFMA. So instead, what we did this time around is to say that instead of waiting for the ESCOM process to unfold, we have relied on the ESCOM application to develop these guidelines. However, we have acknowledged that the final guideline and benchmarks might look different as we will be utilizing the final approved ESCOM ERTA numbers, which are currently not available. But upon finalization of this process, it's then that these numbers will be available, and then we'll be utilizing those. So I think one last thing I want to maybe point members to is to say that although the recommended guideline increase appears to be high, I think this is because we are using ESCOM's application as a basis for the bulk purchase increases. This implicitly then assumes that NERSA will award ESCOM all the revenue that it's applying for. This is what's implicit in us utilizing the application as opposed to the approved. But we know that this will not be the case, as NERSA is currently assessing the revenue applications, and it will come to a different decision to what ESCOM has applied for. And then, Chairperson, without wasting any further time, there's just one last issue that normally comes up annually when we get to approve these guideline increase and benchmarks, and is the issue of the small-scale embedded generators, or SSEGs. So we have since determined, just in a nutshell, that NERSA is actually deprived of the regulatory powers for approving these small-scale embedded generator tariffs. So as a result, these will not be considered in the next cycle. With that being said, members are requested to approve the publication of the consultation paper on the municipal tariff guideline increase and benchmarks for the 23-24 financial year, which will in turn allow us to be able to publish the final guideline increase and benchmarks by around no later than 27 January. With that being said, I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chabalala. Before members, before I open this up, I just wanted to raise a couple of points just for clarity, just so that as we proceed from, I think, from some kind of a shared understanding. And the point I want to raise is like this. I think sometimes there is we don't always we're not always aligned in terms of the terminology. So for instance, the courts have said you can't use benchmarks. People are asking that we need to move to cost of supply based tariffs. So and I think we need to have a shared view of that. That is, some of us read that statement, and if when we discuss that item under 19, we'll discuss with it in detail as well. That cost of supply means exactly that whatever tariff that to come up, it must be predicated on the actual cost that each municipality is faced with in terms of providing that service. Nothing more, nothing less. So I think as we read that, and we may emphasize this later, but sometimes we tend to have a not so shared a view on this. So some of us see this as a cost-reflective distribution tariff for each of the municipalities, something that is predicated and based on the cost that each municipality is actually facing, something that is auditable, something that says if they are asking in the tariff that they are applying for, if they are asking for compensation for maintenance and other things, that they are actually undertaking that maintenance. If they are actually asking for a return, it's a return on the assets that they actually own. So it must actually be a reflection of the cost of supply. That's what the tariff is. And I'm going to ask that as we move forward, because there is section 3.3, which I think is very unfortunate in the manner it is written, because it communicates something which is not correct. For instance, we do have RRMs, that all the licensees are supposed to be those regulatory accounts, the financial that come out of those disaggregated regulatory accounts, that each licensee is supposed to be submitting. Whether that's actually a condition of license of the majority of these municipalities is a totally different story. But that data in terms of the cost that each municipality is facing, unfortunately, some municipalities may not be ring-fencing this, may not be providing this information properly. But that information is supposed to be provided anyway. So some of the comments that are made under section 3.3 are very, very unfortunate. I just thought I'll actually bring that up front. Then I would like to then open this conversation to members for engagement. Firstly, let's deal with comments and questions. By show of hands, members. Starting with Madame Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the presenters. I appreciate also the clarification that was provided earlier on by the colleagues, but I still do have doubts, Chairperson, and I need to be clarified so that we are not seen to be in contempt of the court decision, especially if we're looking at the implementation of these proposed guidelines and benchmarks, Chair. The fact is that when we approve the tariffs for municipalities, Chairperson, the implementation date is the 1st of July of every year. Now, it would mean that whatever approach that we come up with, at least based on these guidelines and benchmarks, we will only implement that for 4 months up until October 2023. My understanding is that we are given only 12 months from the date of the judgment. If then I am correct that we are only given 12 months from the date of the judgment, and the judgment was delivered on the 20th of October. So if it's 12 months from that time, then you count July, August, September, October. We are only left with 4 months. We'll be only left with 4 months to implement municipal tariffs that are calculated based on guideline increases as well as the benchmarks. Now, the question is it worthwhile? Apart just from the fact that we need to get ourselves ready and come up with an approach that is acceptable and that is consistent with the Electricity Regulation Act, which is the tariffs that are based on the cost of supply. So the question is this process worthwhile? Firstly, from the fact that it has been pronounced that this approach is invalid and unlawful. So that's the first thing. And the second one is, even if we say we've got a grace period of 12 months, practically that grace period, it only gives us 4 months into the year 2023, 2024. Then what happens? Are we going to approve these tariffs to be valid only for 3 to 4 months? And then what happens thereafter? What tariffs are they going to use? So that is the second thing. But the third thing, Chairperson, given this, I'm sure the parties that took us to court will again, try to interdict this process, given the fact that in reality, this will only mean that municipalities will only have 3 months or 4 months to implement these tariffs using the guidelines and benchmarks. So I would like to be clarified on that point, Chairperson, in the time that we are allowed by the court to correct the invalidity of the approach. The second question, Chairperson, relates to the sequencing of the processes that feed into the development of these tariffs or the methodology for the municipal tariffs. Firstly, we do know that we need to have a decision on the revenue, on Eskom's revenue. That was explained, Chairperson. And the second one is that we already in the process of Eskom's proposed restructuring of retail tariffs, and that process is underway. It has not been finalized. And my question is, the purpose and the value of coming up with the guideline increases and benchmark is so that people can also see the extent of increase that will be expected, because then they will be able to make an assessment of the impact based on the increase that is being proposed through these guidelines and benchmarks. Now, without an exact increase because of the other processes that are still coming up, and there are decisions that that should precede this particular process. Again, my question is, with that, is it worthwhile to go through this process, knowing very well that these are not, even if somebody were to calculate it, they are not going to come to a final number or exact increase where the person then, or people that are likely to be affected, will be able to say, this will be helpful, and this is the impact, and therefore, because of this impact, these are the meaningful comments and input that I can provide. And even for purposes of budgeting it by the municipalities and the council to approve the budgets, I think this will also be an issue where they do not know exactly how the revenue as well as the retail tariffs by Eskom will impact on them. So those are the questions from my side, Chairperson. I would like to stop here, and if the colleagues can clarify that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Massetti. Mr. Mkiza, hopefully you won't over-exert yourself.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to the presenters. I just want to get clarity here. I think it would have helped to include in the submission the this structural mandamus that is spoken of. I think it's under 4. Is it 4.2? But in terms of the agreement post the court decision, because it allowed the parties to then engage and agree on the way forward. And there's talk there of the 1st of July. The issue of clarification of the time frames, that when we come with this method, we are going to last for at least a year, instead of the 4 months that there is actually an agreement in place now. We're not going to find ourselves being challenged in terms of the legality. And I think when we're dealing with this, it's also important to premise it in terms of the legislation or law, as to where are we moving from, looking at this methodology that we are going to be using in the interim, and the nature of the interim. I was not so sure in the beginning when I read. It became clearer when one went further down, but it's not so clear that this is an interim thing, because one can argue that even if you've got a cost, the cost of supply, you will still have you'll still have to have some kind of benchmarks and guidelines. So I just want them to be categorical in terms of the issue of benchmarks and everything not applicable thereafter, because I was thinking that the cost of supply could still be deemed inefficient in some way, and then you'll have to revise the benchmarks and the guidelines after that, just to try to drive efficiencies. So in terms of the principle and in terms of the terminology, I want us to be very clear with that. So that is one. And then 2, on 4.5, where you've got your time frames there, please just indicate that these are indicative timelines. They may change here and there, so they're indicative in their nature. And then also align to the 30-day consultation timeline, and also ensure that active engagement of stakeholders at technical level also continue to happen during this period. And I would appreciate if we can also have an indicative timeline for a public hearing should such a need arise. I don't see it here. So those timeframes, they need to be realistic based on for example, the document that we're dealing with at REC yesterday. And then under 5.4, we need to clearly locate this within the provision of legislation, as well as paragraph 5 in terms of touching on that agreement with that legal term in it, the structural agreement. And then the other issue that I just on the last part, clarity from my side on Annexure A, if you can clarify the units that are used there, the R.C per kilowatt hour, and then in the numbers you still put the R for the rand. My understanding is that because you put the unit, you then just put numbers as they are there, just to be technically correct in terms of all the tables. Let's just be technically correct in terms of how we present it, and indicate that the VAT is sitting at 15%. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Madam Sibia, I saw your hand was up. Are you covered, ma'am? And also, Mr. Pukula, yes, Madam Sibia? Are you covered?
Yes. Partly covered, Chair, because I got cut off due to load shedding. But my question was on the issue of the applicability of this paper today, to say, because from 5.2 on the motivation on the document, it states that the agreement was with the settlement agreement was that the migration to setting the tariff using cost of supply, it should be done by July 2024. I just wanted to find out, in line with the court decision, what is the progress with regards to that, so that we don't find ourselves not complying with the court decision and be found in contempt of court. And also what was raised by Member Masetti earlier, the issue of just approving something that will be applicable for the 4 months. So for me, that is where my I'm unsettled when it comes to the proposal in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Spear. Mr. Pokolo?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't raise my hand, but I think when you probed, I thought I must indicate what my stance or direction is. I would like to first hear what the answers or responses to the things that Ms. Masetti asked, but I would want to take a stance that's safer in saying that we don't have to publish a guideline decision. We did it was done at NESA to assist municipalities who didn't have the wherewithal to do this. We can tell them to apply in the way that they need to apply, and we can determine what that is, and we can internally use the guideline ourselves to evaluate whether the pricing is appropriate or not in those that don't have a cost of supply study. And in that way, you are meeting the requirements as it's in the Act, but I'm happy to hear what the answers are, but I think a safer route is to not even have a guideline increase that's already been declared unlawful, and just use it internally and have another process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pula, for the guideline. I think it would be then useful for legal. I'm hoping that Mr. Murati is on the call, because I think a lot of the questions here are more legal in nature. I know that the colleagues may be able to respond. Thabo, I'm sure you'll venture into responding, but it would be useful if we had Mr. Murati on the call to assist, because I think that's going to be a primary one, and we'll probably give members a second round to actually then answer based on your responses. But Mr. Murati, before you respond, before Mr. Chabalala and with the assistance of legal will respond, I do want to remind members of one thing though, that remembering that although this process previously and with the guidance now that is provided by Mr. Pokula, but this process had always relied on, we had to wait for the ERSA, the actual percentage increases coming out of ERSA, the ESCOM tariff, the ESCOM retail tariff increases. But we don't consult on the ERSA side. We consult on the structure, which has been consulted on, a decision not made yet, would still be made. We don't consult on that. But remembering, members, that the issue of the revenue increase, which goes into that ERSA, if you include all of the other issues that are also on the table today in terms of they're included in that revenue determination, is that we are going to be asked to make a decision on this at the end of the month anyway. So we need to take that into account. That is not like we're going to be waiting like we normally do until February, March next year for that kind of pronouncement. But that in this particular time, we're hoping that there will be a decision by end of this month in terms of what that revenue increase will be. But because we don't then consult on the retail tariff increases themselves, we will be in a position to, if need be, to then adapt the actual paper. Again, as I'm saying, guided by the input by Mr. Pokula, which is really useful, I think, if legal will find that to be if we can proceed down that route. But nonetheless, I thought, let me premise it that way, that in fact, the matters that the actual number that will go into the consultation paper in terms of the revenue increase or in terms of the ERSA is a decision that is sought from members today. However, can only be made by ER at the end of the month. So I just thought I'll actually premise it that way. But Mr. Chawala, would you want to venture, or Mr. Murati will be able to assist with the rest of the questions? We will all assist, of course. Mr. Chawala, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I actually wanted to indicate that most of the questions that were posed were actually legal in nature, and they were the manner in which they were so specific. I am honestly not comfortable in interpreting the legal aspects to it, and I would rather leave it to Ndate Morati to take over that aspect. But once again, there is another aspect that was raised by Madam Maseti to say that what is the usefulness of us publishing a number that is going to be looking quite different to the final output at the end? And initially, I was tempted to respond to indicate that historically, the aim was always that to say that whenever we publish this consultation paper, we never actually indicate that these numbers are final, but we are actually seeking input from the public to say that which aspects should be amended, which normally you would find that the number consulted on rarely ever differs from the final published number, but that was the whole intention for consulting. But obviously, that response sort of got superseded by events when Mr. Bukula came in and indicated to say that we actually do not even need to publish these guidelines. It's a tool that we can end up using internally. So at this point, I'm actually just a soldier now, awaiting to see what sort of direction we are going to end up with. Coming into this meeting, I know the recommendation was to say that let us get these approved, let's get the consultation paper approved, but now I am just awaiting instruction. Thank you, Mr. Gumet.
Thank you. Mr. Murati, if you can assist, please. There are very specific issues that are even the validity for 4 months and so forth. Mr. Murati?
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, members and fellow colleagues. Chair, maybe as a start, maybe this the item, the submission that the Chabalala has just presented. But let me deal with the issues that have been raised. And the section 15 becomes the anchor of the mandate and how tariff determination of the regulator is supposed to be done. And it became central in the court case that will be discussed in item 19 to highlight how it is interpreted and how it is applied. The issue that has come out clearly in the judgment has been that the guideline is not a license condition, and it not being a license condition, there is difficulty in finding its relevance in the determination of the tariff, of which we submitted that the guideline does not have an external effect on its own. So you cannot deal with the lawfulness or unlawfulness of the guideline. It only becomes relevant when it is implemented in the determination of the tariff. That became the principle that the court has dealt with. In the instance that we have to go with what has been submitted and the issues that members have raised, the court order that we have, it's such that the guideline has been declared unlawful, or the usage of the guideline has been declared unlawful. But that unlawfulness has been suspended for a period of 12 months. And that 12 months, the court went further to highlight that it is not a 12 month that, as Madam Masheti has highlighted, that the 4 month then will only be valid for 4 months. The court highlighted that when decision has to be made. So the 12 month is linked to the decision making. So it's only related to the 24-25 tariffs that the regulator cannot use the guideline in determining that. When the regulator decides on the 23-24 tariffs, that decision will remain valid for the year because it has been determined during the grace period that the court has. When we got the judgment, we approached the senior counsel to get guidance in terms of how do we read the 12 month, because we were also under the reading that the guideline has been declared to be unlawful. Therefore, the regulator cannot use the guideline. And senior counsel gave us an advice that the 12 month, it's only for during the time of decision. If the 12 month, by the time that the decision is being made, the 12 month hasn't lapsed, then that decision will remain valid and will still be within the protection that the court order has given. And it will remain in existence for the life of it, which is a year. Only in the coming financial year, when we have to determine the tariff, the guideline cannot be. One also needs to deal with the issue that in the instance that the regulator we were to decide on a tariff of the period, two things will follow that particular decision that we would have made. One, that we would have made to the court. Two, the decision that we would have made would lack the force and guidance or took a decision to continue to utilize on the basis that we would not be publishing it. So, Chair, maybe with your permission, may I be permitted to address that issue when we deal with item 19 and not in a public space. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Mr. Chota, before I maybe can I just redirect the question? I've noted your hand, Ms. Maseti. Can I redirect the question to Mr. Murati? You premised your input by saying perhaps we should have dealt with item 19 first. Do you believe that maybe there is merit in us suspending further input on this item for now, until we've dealt with item 19 and then come back for a decision on this, because I'm just a bit worried that perhaps the decision that we may take here may differ from the decision that we may take later on. With your guidance, what's your proposal? Would you rather shouldn't we then suspend the conversation on this item until we've dealt with item 19, and then we can then come back later once we've dealt with item 19, maybe to then conclude this matter? What's your view?
Yeah, that will be my guidance, considering that there are many issues that have been said in the judgment, to which, when such a decision is being made, they would require to be paid attention to, so that it is not just going to be a situation where we proceed in the ordinary or in the way that we have been doing. So for me, my guidance would be to say this we can pack it and deal with it post the presentation, where members will ventilate strongly on the judgment itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Madam Massetti, can I recognize you, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Bukuli. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I've not forgotten you. Can I just give preference to members first? Madam Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I do support the proposal that we may park the conversation, but because the agenda is quite too long, I would like us to also be mindful of the time, Chairperson, and also if the colleagues can respond to questions that we have asked directly, Chairperson, in terms of the usefulness, because you want to see the extent of increase so that you can get meaningful participation during this process. But the question that I wanted to come to as a follow-up, Chairperson, is on the order that was made by the High Court, which I'm reading it verbatim, Chairperson. It says the declaration of invalidity is suspended for a period of 12 months, from the date of this order, to allow the National Energy Regulator of South Africa an opportunity to correct the defect. So I did not read this to mean that from the date of a future decision to be taken by the energy regulator, still considering the benchmarks or guidelines, but it is the 12 months that is based on the date of the order that is delivered by the High Court, the order that is made, by the High Court. So maybe there's a need for clarification on that one, Chairperson. I read it as is from the judgment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Massetti, and as we agreed, we'll deal with it after we've dealt with item 19. Mr. Pukula, your guidance, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Gumede. Mr. Gumede, you know, there will be no harm, even if we are going to discuss what we are going to discuss in item number 19. There will be no harm in us saying that we are not approving this guideline thing, because when you really look at what it was going to do, I don't want to use the words of Ms. Massetti, the usefulness. When you are going to look at it, I mean, if they are going to use the 32% number that Eskom, they will come to a certain number. But when we make our decision, we will come to a different number, maybe higher or lower than that. But the decision by a municipality to apply is not only guided by that number of Eskom. They may very well say that if the number then is this, we prefer to lower this and that. So there will be no harm in us saying this is not approved. And yes, we will look at whatever the court says, but we are not late for anything. We will ask municipalities to apply in the way that the law requires them to apply, and not take the hit for them. And we will use what we can use, or what the guideline enables us to use, and it's done. There's no legal requirement that we must have a guideline. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pukula. I guess the issue, by the way, colleagues, we still have one more ELS and ER sitting in December, that in the event that will happen after a decision on the Eskom revenue has been made, with its implication in terms of the EFSA increases as well. So perhaps, if anything, should we then not then, I guess, taking the proposal by Mr. Bukula that we don't approve this, we may then decide that it may come back after we have a conversation on 19. But at this stage, that if we can then put it to the members, that we then decide that we don't approve this, and maybe later, and once we've engaged on 19, we may reach a different request that we may then extend to the team. Can I see if there will be support for that view, that we don't approve this? We actually go to, there's a recommendation which is on paragraph 14, that we don't approve that consultation paper, and we leave it at that. But that decision, I guess the issue then becomes whether we can revisit our own decision. But when we after 19, we perhaps may request that the team bring it back in whatever form, if there's a need to, assuming that perhaps we may reach a different conclusion after we've discussed 19. But if we don't, clearly this item is not approved. So I'd actually like to put it to members, but I'm not sure how to phrase it, just that we don't end up with a FUNCAS official problem, in the event that after 19 we decide that perhaps we may still proceed once the decision of the regulator in terms of Eskom revenue has been arrived at. So I don't know how to phrase it. If I could be assisted before I actually put it to members for a vote. Madam Maseti.
Chairperson, quickly, maybe what will assist us in that question is to get clarification on whether or not guidelines is an administrative action. My understanding of the point made by Mr. Murati earlier is that the issue of whether or not it's an administrative action, it was dealt with in court, and I don't believe that it is an administrative action, or whether the courts have ever pronounced on that, and therefore maybe the concern that you have might not be a serious one. Yes, so we might be still good. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Murati, if you can just guide on that as advised. Mr. Bukula had clearly indicated that's the guideline intended for us. It was never supposed to be consulted on in the first place. But maybe if you can maybe guide on that, so that at least when we make the decision now, we may not fall foul of, after our discussion on in terms of item 19. If you can guide Mr.
Chair, Madam Masset is very correct. The guideline is not an administrative action, the same way that in the GOG and Bobet matter, this issue was dealt with, that methodology and the guidelines, they are not administrative action. It's only after, when they have been applied, such a decision that follows the usage of it becomes an administrative action. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. In that case, members, there's a proposal from Mr. Bukula that if we look at paragraph 14, the recommendation that we actually do not approve. Can I see by show of hands for the support of that proposal, members? Madam Maseti, thank you. Mr. Bukula, Ms. Masia, Advocate Sitole, Mr. Mkize, and I also support. So you have a decision, Mr. Shabalala, not approved. Thank you. Can we then move on to item? There are some items that will go quickly, members. So can we go to item 7? But please, colleagues, just make sure that the heading corresponds with the item, because there seems to be a challenge. And welcome, Mr. Dlamini. So you'll be able to address us if we have a challenge with the item as reflected and the document which is published. Can we then, Mr. Mavuso, who's presenting item 7?
Thanks, Chair. I won't waste time. I'll just give it directly to Dorcas to do the presentation. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Madam. If you can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, members and colleagues. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to approve a temporary exemption for Solar Capital Orange Farm 1 from complying with clauses 7.32 and 7.33 of the Grid Connection Code for Renewable Energy Power Plants. So the ELS is duly delegated as per clause 1.7 of the electricity delegation matrix to approve exemptions from the grid code. Solar capital. So this plant was selected under bid window 4 of the REAP program to supply 75 megawatts of solar PV into the national grid. So the plant currently does not comply with grid connection requirements for plants that are greater than 20 megawatts for reactive power capability. So pages 3 to 5 of the
Mr. Kalakana, before you do, you know, there's one thing, this is exactly what the point is here. I'm not sure if with members, if it's just me. Item 7, that's there is application for tariff reduction.
Okay.
Members, I'm not sure if you've got the same document as I have published under item 7. Members, if I could be guided? Because the document I have under
it is
item,
correct, Chairperson. It is correct. Is the tariff reduction and subsequent amendment of the PPA for Kucha.
Right. If we can then,
same.
yes, if we can then maybe direct us, Madam, to, I know maybe it's you're the wrong person to ask. Can I ask Mr. Dlamini? Can you, in terms of the items as published, under what item is this? Under what number is this item published? I think it's item 8. So we may have swapped that. So we are dealing with the temporary exemption for solar capital orange PV farm, correct, Madam?
Yes, we
Okay, so members, that is published under item 8. Apologies to if you disturb you. If you can continue then, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. So I was just indicating that in from pages 3 to 5 of the submission then deals with what the code requirement is, the reason for non-compliance for this plant, and the remedial actions. But just briefly, in terms of the requirement, these RPPs that are greater than 20 megawatts are required to support the network by providing or reducing reactive power whenever required by the system. This is in order to assist in maintaining the system voltage within acceptable limits. So this particular plant is a 75 megawatt plant, and based on its current design, is not capable of meeting that full reactive power requirement. However, the plant can produce reactive power at a reduced power of 70 megawatts. So in order to correct the non-compliance, the plant has a plan to install a capacitor bank which will help them compensate for the lacking capability. However, the project will not be completed by the time that they plan to go on commercial operation. So in terms of the risks associated with the granting of this exemption, those are highlighted briefly under section 6, but I will not go into them, the risk and how that will be mitigated. So I think then I would like to move to section 14, which is on page 6, if I'm not mistaken. I can quickly
page 8 of 9.
Yes, okay, thanks. Page 8 of 9. So under section 14, then it is recommended that the ELS approve the temporary exemption for solar capital orange farm 1 as outlined in table 2, and also approve the conditions that will then be attached to the exemption as outlined in 14.2. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Kalakani, for the presentation. Members, any questions, comments? Seems like there are no questions for you, Madam. I did want to correct one thing. I think in terms of the wording, I was hoping I was going to preempt this from knowing Mr. Mkize may have asked this. On page 3 of 9 on motivation, I think when we talk about reactive power, I think for the electrical engineers here, they may not like the word when we say it doesn't do, it's that paragraph under table 1 that says reactive power is power that flows, whatever, without doing useful power. I think perhaps use, it's more about active, but it is still useful. So I think, we must be careful in terms of the choice of words. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you, CEO. So I was just asking that you maybe just choose a better word there other than useful work, because ancillary services are still useful work. All right. Thank you. Members, there were no questions or comments, so can we then move to a decision that is sought on page 8 of 9? Those paragraphs, maybe just, I'm not going to read it. I assume that it's been read, unless, of course, perhaps maybe just to read it into a record that we are requested to approve the exemption as outlined in Table 3, and also to approve the conditions of these temporary exemptions as outlined below. There are these 6 conditions: the general demonstrating, through testing and otherwise, to the satisfaction of systems operator and the national system and the NSP, the current capability in relation to the requirement, the quarterly reporting to NERSA, should the network conditions require that lacking capability as may be required, the generator shall reduce output, and fourthly, there will be no deemed energy. Thank you. I assume, Madam Spear, your hand is for approval.
Yes, Chair, but I just wanted to clarity with regards to the conditions.
Okay.
What implications if they are not met, or some of them are not met? Does that mean the temporary exemption is revised or is reviewed, or it's business as usual?
Thank you, Madam. Can we assist Ms. Wakalakane first before we proceed to a decision? Assist with the response.
Yes. So the conditions are mainly to help us as NERSA to be able to track progress on these plans, and also in terms of what the plant can do currently, to say that the plant should continue to meet the requirements that they are capable of meeting. So obviously, then if those conditions are not met, it will then be regarded as a non-compliance. And I think in terms of how non-compliances are dealt with, then in some instances, then there will be penalties. But we've never really had that, and in terms of monitoring, we are assisted by the system operator and the NSPs, because those are the first people that will know that a particular plant is not complying to what they've agreed on. Then the matter would be brought to NERSA for resolution.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Spear, are you covered?
Yes, Chair, I'm covered, but for the team to note that there's always a first time for everything.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Madam. With that, members, can we move to a decision that is sought, as have been read out for the record under paragraph 14, page 8 of 9. Can I see by show of hands, members, if we can approve that, the exemption? Thank you, Madam Spear. Thank you, Madam Massetti. Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Mr. Pokula, sir, are you comfortable? I support the decision. Thank you, Mr. Pokula. All right. Can we now go back? Okay. I'll write the team to assist us here. We've now dealt with item 8, actually, although it's reflected differently here. What is the next agenda item, Mr. Lamin? Or should I ask Mr. Pokula? Is that a lingering hand? Thank you. Thank you. So what is the next item? Apologies, members, we might be jumping around because somehow the documents that published do not match the numbering. So there was an item. So can we now consider that the item under item 8, the item under item 7, where is it supposed to be, Mr. Mavuso? That's referring to the tariff reduction. Which item is that on the agenda?
Chair, firstly, in my own agenda, I actually have another exemption, which is the one that starts with Robson Deep. That is where I'm reading from, which will be.
Would you therefore suggest that we actually deal with the exemption first, which is agenda item number 9?
Yes, Chair.
All
Yes.
right, thank you. Let's deal with agenda item 9, colleagues. We will then come back to the other item which you skipped. Over to you, Mr. Mavuso.
This one will be presented by Willie.
Kiza, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to also present an exemption. This time it's for Appendix 9 of the Renewable Energy Power Plant Grid Code. So the following plants are requesting to be exempted from these tests, which are supposed to be done every 6 years. The plants are Robinson Deep Landfill Gas Plant, North Jolie Wind Farm, Toby Vaux Tom Buke PV Plant, and Electra Capital PV, which is located in the Western Cape. So in terms of the motivation for this, the GCAC meets every quarter to discuss these exemptions. So in this particular meeting was held on the 29th of September, where these exemptions were considered, and the decision was to recommend that they be approved by this subcommittee. Maybe just to draw your attention to Table 1, it basically specifies the specific clauses that the applicants are applying for exemption. So Robertson Deep, for example, is applying for exemption from A9, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5. And the reason for these exemptions vary, and they are specified in Table 2. But the most prevalent, as you can see, is A923, which is active power control. And the reasons for that are various, including defective equipment, equipment that has been stolen, and so forth. So, but the details are provided in Table 2 to provide the reasons for extensions. Maybe of note on Table 2 is the dates that the applicants are requesting. Some of them are requesting extensions for exemptions that have already been granted. But those are all specified on Table 2. And then I draw your attention to the last section of the presentation, which is what we are asking the ELS subcommittee to approve. And that is in 14.1 to approve the temporary exemptions for all applicants as outlined in Table 3. Of course, there are conditions for these exemptions, which are specified in Section 4.2 of the presentation. With that, I thank you, Chair, and I can, if I may just hand over back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. The conditions are on 14.2, members. Any questions, comments, members, on the presentation, on the item? Seems like it's quite clear. So, thank you, Mr. Pukula. It's quite clear. So, can I then take it to a decision? Mr. Mkhize has done us a favor and read the actual request in terms of recommendation onto the record. If by show of hands, members, can I see support for those recommendations, which are on page 10 of 12? Thank you, Ms. Massetti, Mr. Pukula. I note that the advocate has had to leave. There's another matter that he needs to deal with. Mr. Mkhize, are you able to support, sir? I do recognize.
Yes, I support.
Thank you. I also support. So you've got your decision there, Mr. Mkhize, on this item. Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Can you then, I'll be guided by you, Mr. Mavuso. Should we then proceed to item Remember now, item 10 is the one that has been withdrawn.
Yes, Chair, but we still have another exemption, which will be presented by Madam.
But that exemption, I know there's an exemption which is published under item 10, the Aggeneys one. But
yes,
which agenda item would that exemption fall under? In terms of the agenda. Mr. Lamin?
Chair, it's difficult from my side because
item 9, sir.
Yes.
So it's supposed to fall under item 9. So, okay, all right. So members, the document is published under item 10, but the exemption itself is actually under item 9. So the matter that we've dealt with under item 9, this is very confusing. The matter that we've dealt with under item 9 would have been the matter that is referred to on the agenda as item 8. So if we can just see it that way. So can we then have the presentation, which is agenda item 9, but the document itself is under item 10. Please proceed, Mr. Mabos.
Madonna will present this one, Chair. Thanks.
Right.
Okay. Good morning, Chairperson, ELS members and colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Copper. Please proceed.
Yep. On this item, it's an exemption from the grid codes for Aggeneys as well as Excella Wind Farm from complying with clause 9 of 4 and 9 of 8 of the RPP code. Clause 9 of 4 and 9 of 8 are power quality clauses. In a more simplified terminology, power quality refers to the capability of the power system to provide consumer load with proper power in terms of defined voltage and frequency. So for clause 9 of 4, it deals with exceeding apportionment limit as determined by the relevant NSP in terms of current and voltage quality distortion. Clause 9 of 8 deals with the resonance of frequency on which the RPP may not connect to the grid. The applicant, which is Aggeneys, was commissioned in July 2020, and Excella was commissioned in December 2020. The non-compliance of Aggeneys is that they have about 9 harmonic exceeding apportionment as set by the decoser, while Excella has about 3 harmonic exceeding apportionment as set by the decoser. The remedial actions for the RPP is that during the exemption period, the RPP will design, procure, and install the active harmonic filter. This harmonic filter will assist by cancelling any exceeding harmonic currents according to the measurement by the NSP as well as the RPP. There is a NSP support letter and a project schedule for the Aggeneys, which is attached on Annexure A, on which the exemption is up until the 31st of January 2024. And the attachment for Excella for the NSP support letter and the project schedule is on Annexure B, and the exemption is up until the 15th of January 2024. And with that, then the recommendation is that the ELS approves the temporary exemption of the applicant as outlined on the table with the conditions on 14.14, and the table 3 is of the recommendation is on page 8 of 11. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Members, any questions, comments on the item? If there are none, then can I direct you to paragraph 14? It starts on page 7 of 11. If I can direct you to that. Mr. Pupa has assisted us in terms of reading the actual recommendation to the record and the conditions that are going to be applicable to these exemptions are spelled out under paragraph 14.1.2. So with that, members, can I see by show of hands support for the decision? Thank you, Madam Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Nkize. Thank you, Mr. Pokula. Thank you, Madam Spear. I also support. Thank you, Mr. Kopa. You've got your decision. Mr. Mavuso.
Yes. Chair, now we are on that agenda item on the tariff reduction of Kucha Wind Farm, and it will be presented by Tamai.
All right. So on item 11, members, we've got the MYPD in terms of our document, and I think it's published twice. So if I recall properly, I think it's under item 11, published under item 11, and also under item 12 as well. I think Madam Spear, you did identify that. So can you then go back now to the item which is published under item 7? That is the application for that reduction. If we can consider that, please. So it's under item 7, members. Over to you, Mr. Mabuse.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Horace.
Yes. This is an application for tariff reduction and subsequent amendment of the PPA by Kuka Wind Farm. Kuka Wind Farm is one of the renewable energy bid window projects. Members would recall that the tariffs for bid window 1 to 3.5 projects were high as compared to bid window 4 projects, and this created a perception that they were overpriced. The DMRE, IPPs, and lenders then came up with the refinancing protocol to reduce the tariffs. Under the refinancing protocol, the profit is shared on a 50-50 basis by the project companies and the buyer in the form of reduced tariffs. So Kuka Farm participated in this refinancing protocol, and the refinancing encompasses the following as in paragraph 20 of the RFD. The first one is the reduction of all debt margin. Then the second one, the increase in debt and extending debt repayment period, as well as replacing the debt service reserve account with the debt reserve service facility, and replacing the maintenance reserve account with the maintenance reserve service facility, and lastly, the reduction of the urgent facility fees. The application itself is in compliance with the license conditions 8.2. And as evident in the RFD, paragraph 22, the under financial analysis, the project would still be financially viable. All the numbers are confidential, so we will not divulge them. But we recommend that the Electricity Subcommittee approve the recommendation based on paragraph 14 of the submission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hora. Before I open it to members, can you just clarify this? I thought the tariffs themselves, the actual resultant tariffs, those are public numbers. Is that not correct? Just a correction, Mr. Hore. Just for my own benefit. I thought the actual tariffs themselves, which would then appear under 14.1.1, would actually be, those numbers are actually public numbers. Am I incorrect?
They have not been. They were publicly divulged during licensing, but subsequent to licensing, especially on this refinancing, they are not being divulged to avoid a situation where the other projects might want to avoid competition. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Hore, for that. It's a bit confusing, but members, any comments, questions? Dinswalo, if you can mute yourself, please. Ms. Maluleka, if you can mute yourself, please. Members, any comments, questions? If none, can I then direct you to, with the conditions that have been put forward to us, that we can't divulge the numbers. So is that a tariff reduction, and also the request for us is for the amendment of the PPA. So that is what is asked of us, members. With a show of hands, can we support that decision? Can I see if we support? Thank you, Mr. Pukula. Thank you, Mr. Mkize, Madam Aseti, Ms. Bia. I also support. Thank you, Mr. Hora, you've got your decision. All right, now let's see whether we can get these numbers going, whether we can get these numbers correct. So the next item now is meant to have been that item that has been withdrawn, Mr. Mavuso, correct? Item 10, which although it has a document attached to it, in fact, it is withdrawn. Am I correct?
I'm not sure because
that is correct, Mr. Committee, yes.
It is correct. All right. All right. So now we are moving to item, we're now moving to item 11. But under item 11, that's repeated under item 12. Correct?
That's correct, Mr. Committee.
All right. So and my request, members, was that Madam Spear, your hand is up, ma'am.
Sorry, Chair, old hand.
Okay, thank you. I had requested that we tackle item 14 first, largely because we do have the decision that is sought under item 14 feeds into item 12. So members, if we can do that, if we can, with your permission, Madam Spear. Thank you. With your permission, members, if we can then tackle item 14. Mr. Mavuso, item 14, please. The implementation.
14, Chair, from my side is ESCOM Holdings, RCA, and that will be presented by Tilly, supported by Buis.
Thank you. Ntakeni, Ms. Mabenya, I'm not sure who between you is presenting.
Yes, Chairperson, thank you very much. Myself, and good morning to you and the members and colleagues. I just want to, maybe before I get into the submission, to make sure that I'm running with the correct submission. Is it the RCA or the implementation of RCAs?
It's implementation, Mr. Ntakeni, because you then make reference to them in the item that you have under 12.
Yes. No.
All right. Please.
I'm certain.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry to barge in, Chair. Just a reminder to members and the presenters that we are not at liberty to mention the numbers.
Thank you again, Mr. Chotlo. I thought I would actually remind members again, but yes, we're not at liberty to. Although in this particular one, Mr. Chotlo, the number that's there has already been published. The RCA was that decision was that RCA decision. Unless what you are saying is that there are other numbers as well, other than that RCA decision, because that RCA decision was made a while ago. It's just the actual implementation, whether it's 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah, maybe my confusion, Chair. I'm fine with that, Chair.
Okay.
I think it's just my confusion. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ntakeni, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. So the submission is about the implementation, as you indicated, of the RCA for the year 2019-20, which is an RCA of about 4.6 billion. However, we thought, Chairperson, because we are in the process of dealing with the 2020-21 RCA, which is also part of the submission, we should also include that RCA. So the submission relates to the two RCA. So in the submission, there's table 1, table 2, which shows details of those submissions. In this submission, we also included the 15 billion, which relates to the 69 billion government injection, which is also to be recovered from customers. So all these amounts, the RCAs, the government injection of 15 billion, are to be recovered from both standard tariff customers and special tariff and international customers. Part of this submission, Chairperson, are the MYPD5 revenues, which are also going to be dealt with in this meeting, and the MYPD5 revenues and the 2020-21 RCA are recommended amount. So if I can rush quickly to table 1 under page 3, which is the decision that we seek, you will see under table 1 that the first line that says revenue as applied for is actually supposed to be revenue as approved / recommended, because the revenue under 2024 and the 2024-25 are the initial numbers that are being recommended to the members to approve. And then the government injection, I've spoken about it. The amount that is indicated there is the amount that will be recovered from the standard customer, and then the balance will be recovered from the special tariff. And then if you...
So sorry, Mr. Ntakeni, members, the table 1 he's referring to is in the decision itself. Yes. on page 13 or page 3 of the decision. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairperson. So if you go to the under year 2023-24, what we are recommending is that the RCA, which is about which as approved was 4. I think it's
3.4. The RCA 1920 was 3.4, but
yes, 3.4. So the part of it that is indicated of 3.3 here is the one that should be recovered from the standard customer. And the one that is being recommended, which I will not show, is also the one that should be recovered from the standard tariff customer. And all of that, as indicated, under the raw percentage increase will give an increase as indicated in that table. So what we are recommending, Chairperson, is that this RCA should be recovered within the period of 1 year. Because what we have realized is that when the RCAs are being spread, they give a better negative impact in a short run. But in the long run, they have a negative impact in the long run for both current customers and future customers. So that is why we are recommending that it's better to have the RCA to be implemented, both of them in 1 year. And also the difference between implementing in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, there isn't much significant different Chairperson. So we are recommending that the ELS approve the implementation of RCA as tabled in table 1, and the recommendation are on page 10 of the submission. There are sections in the submission which will request members to, because they are yet to be updated, section 9, 10, and 11. We are yet to update those sections, and apologies for that, members. So if we make reference to them, they may not make sense to what we are recommending. Thank you, Chairperson. If I can leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Mr. Ntakeni. Members, if I can just to assist. So the decision that is sought, I think it's best to actually read from the decision what is being requested of us. Either way, Mr. Ntakeni, just before, has the decision on the MYPD, on the RCA of the 2020-2021 RCA, has that decision been made?
No, it has not been made, Chairperson. It's part of the submissions today.
I see. Okay. So members, anyway, the decision that is sought, it's those RCAs 2019-20 and also RCA of 2020-21. The RCA of 2019-20, the decision was made by the ER, is that number of 3.4, but what is asked from standard consumers is 3.3. So that's the first one. So that is what is requested, and the request from the team is that is implemented in 1 year. So as a decision that has not been made by the energy regulator of the RCA 2020-21 to also be recovered in 1 year from standard customers, but on that paragraph 3, page 12 of 52, that paragraph 3 is important. it's that recovery of the government injection is 15 billion, but what is recovered from standard consumers is 14.233 for both for FY 23-24, and then the rest for FY 2020. The other 14.55 from FY 24-25. So that is decision that is being asked of members. Can I then maybe just get questions and comments, please? Not sure, members, if it's clear. Thank you, Madam Massetti. If you can go first, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, maybe I must start with the nature of the decisions that are required from us. If I hear you well, Chairperson, it seems we are required to not only make a decision on the revenue application by Eskom for 2023-24 and 2024-25, as we normally would, in terms of just considering the revenue requirement. It seems we are also required to take decisions on the implementation of the RCAs. If I understand, Chairperson, the summary of what is expected of us today, and we usually have those considered separately, because we also need to just demonstrate that we have thoroughly applied ourselves on the impact assessment and also the affordability when we decide on whether or not such RCAs must be implemented over 1 year or over 2 years, take into account issues of affordability as well as the impact. So I wanted to just make sure that I understand what is expected of us, that it is decisions not only on the revenue requirement, but also on the implementation of the RCAs. And I was hoping that then the colleagues will also touch a little bit then on the impact of a request that the RCA be implemented over 1 year as opposed to 2 years, and usually we'll have options or scenarios that will show if it's implemented within 1 year, what will be the impact, and why will that option be one that is reasonable and fair, and then maybe another scenario or option 2 showing why the RCA will have to be implemented over 2 years or so. Rather than just the summary that says that it becomes unfair for other customers. But I think affordability is a substantive consideration when we are confronted with these matters, Chair. So it's those two things, but also just a concern in the way that we are required to take decisions when it comes to the implementation of the RCAs. If I may, Chairperson, just comment now on the.
Madam said, would it help if we indicated, because I think there's a challenge here.
Okay.
In looking at this, ordinarily we should have started with item 13. Now that I think of it, because item 13 is that MYP, it's that RCA 2020-21. Before we go into item 14, which is implementation. But we still have item 12 to deal with, where we're going to deal with the revenues. But because in that item 12, there is reference to these two decisions on 13 and 14, I thought it made sense to then deal with. But ordinarily, I think I was a bit confused myself. I think we should have started with 13. Then once we made a decision on 13, then we'd have moved into the implementation of that decision. And once we've looked at those two, then we go back to the revenue, which is on item 12, which deals with all three, which deals with now all the RCAs, the government injection, and also the extra revenue application. Mr. Ntakeni, have I captured it correctly?
That is very much correct, Chairperson. That is very much correct. Ordinarily, we should have had a decision on RCAs and the revenues, and then we deal with this one.
All right, thank you. All right. So members, I'm not sure whether I'll be messing up your plans if I then requested that we deal with item 13 first, put that to bed, And then we can deal with item 13, so item 14 that says what is proposed in terms of the implementation. That will then assist us when we move to item 12, which is the MYPD. Can I request that we do that, members? Apologies for the confusion.
Yes, Chairperson, I think next time it is important for management, Chairperson, to, when looking at the nature of the submissions, that they sequence the items on the agenda appropriately and assist the RSU in terms of putting those agenda items. Otherwise, it takes a lot of time, Chairperson, and it's also creating some confusion. I think there must be an appreciation of the sequencing of the items that require decision to make it much easier and much more efficient in our decision making and for the meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Therefore, members, can I then request that we then suspend item 14 for now and ask Mr. Ntageni to present item 13, and then we can deliberate of that. But again, as Mr. Sichotro has indicated, unfortunately, that decision is, as it's indicated, is not for approval, but is actually, we need to recommend that to ER. So the numbers that will be spelled out under 13 will not be able to actually talk to the numbers, but rather to the principles. Over to you, Mr. Ntageni.
Thank you, Chairperson. So this one relates to the RCA of 2020-21. This is the RCA that we have received a while ago, sometimes in December last year. And then it was published in February. It was submitted to members on the 2nd of August, and the members requested that we held a workshop, and the workshop was conducted on the 14th, where the guidance was received from the members. Both the issues that members has raised are captured in under Table 1 and Table 2. Based on the guidance that we have received, primarily the guidance that we will need to ensure that we take into account the current methodology, and if there are deviations, there really needs to be a deviation that will not put either of the party, other customers or licensees in a bad position. So the decision that we are seeking is captured under Table 1 of the RFD, which is page 13. I think it's page 13 of the RFD. If we look at the numbering from the top, but the numbering of the document is page 2 of 108. What we have in that table is what Eskom is applying for, which I will mention because it is a public figure. It's about 10.7 billion, and the adjustments that we have managed to arrive at are adjustments which are captured under the next column, as you can see, and that has left us with a decision, as you can see on the last column. And the drivers of this decision mainly will be your expenditure, your primary energy, and sales volume, and the return. Chairperson, I don't know if we have enough time to go into detail of those three major aspects that I've just indicated, but those adjustments are indicated in the table, the detail of which are in the reason for decision, and we can quickly, with your permission, request colleagues to take members through them. Thank you, Chairperson.
Maybe let's do it this way, concerning the time that we have. We're already at 11. Can those be driven by questions by the questions from members, please? Because members will indicate which area they may want to be expanded or expatiated on. Would that be okay, Mr. Ntageni?
Yes, Chairperson. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the decision, members, is on page 13 of 119. in terms of the bottom number, but it's on page 2 of 108. And as indicated, the team can detail, can give you the reasons for the adjustments, not the quantum, but the reasons for the adjustments down, where they've adjusted the application from Eskom. But over to you, members, for any questions and comments in respect of this RCA. Taking into account that we have dealt with it in a workshop, so I would appreciate, I guess, if members are comfortable with the final figures as presented by the team, taking into account that we did have a workshop. I see no hands. So, Mr. Ntakeni, it seems like this one is pretty clear. So the decision, members, that we'll be recommending to ER is on page 2 of 108. So that is the decision that is going to be recommended. Of course, it then falls over into, and then it also talks to, it indicates that the total figure is in the following page, is that it's recoverable from both standard tariff customers as well as SPA and NPAs, well, and international customers, and that the RFD will follow once all of the applicable requirements, including the confidentiality treatment of some data, have been finalized, and then an implementation plan is what then is being dealt with under item 14. With that, members, that's the decision that is sought. Can I then maybe see by show of hands, members, if we are comfortable to recommend this decision to the ER as requested under paragraph 15 on page 10 of 11, by show of hands, members. Thank you, Madam Massetti. Thank you, Mr. Pukula. Thank you, Madam Spear. Mr. Mkize, are you still with us? I do support as well. So we have got 4 members.
Sorry, Mr. Gumede, may I just confirm that what we are approving is the decision of what was already approved? We're only approving the implementation of the decision.
Not on this one, Mr. Pukula. On this one, what we are approving is the RCA amount itself. The implementation will be dealt with under item 14. I think that's where the confusion was. This particular RCA was discussed at the workshop. It was discussed at an ELS meeting first, and the decision was that it be taken to a workshop, and it was workshopped, and now it's coming for a decision on the RCA number itself. So that's what item 13 is about. Is it clear? Or have I confused things matters more?
Okay, Mr. Gumede, help me, because I think maybe my confusion is also on the numbering, because if it's the RCA that was discussed, there were certain comments that were sent, and I'm not sure if they were done, but I know that the number that used to be there is different to the number that's here. So can you maybe help me to get to the, because I'm looking at, we're not dealing with table 3, we're dealing with table 2 of the RCA decision.
We're dealing with table 1 of the decision.
Table 1, the one that says 1920 RCA decision.
The one that says, does it say 1920? It's supposed to be a 2020-2021. And then, yeah, so it's an RCA balance of for 2020-21 financial year. But the decision itself that is sought is under FY21, FY 2021. That's the NESA decision, the number at the bottom there. With the application, what the actual application itself that was.
I think the application. So, Mr. Kumar, the application was public. So, can we just mention that number? Is it the 10.7 application?
Mr. Takemis, we have an answer for you. Please correct.
Yes, that's the 10.7. Perhaps maybe if we can refer to also the page number is page 2 of 108 on the document.
On item 13. I know this is confusing, yeah. Clear, Mr. Pokun? So the total application.
I'm slightly confused, Mr. Kumeda, but I will leave that. So for me, I really can't then provide my vote on this, because I think I was following it the wrong way, because I know in this particular one there were a number of issues that I had written back to Mr. Ntakeni, and I think we had the discussion, but I was hoping he would have brought them back. I know the number has changed, that's being approved, but so I will not be able to vote or support Mr. because I think I was confused. I'll be guided by the rest of the members who are not confused.
Now, Mr. Pukula, can we see if he can provide the responses? And I see his hand is up. So and that's what we're actually hoping to do today as well. Anyway, Mr. Ntakeni, can you please assist so Mr. Pukula can then vote?
Yes, Chairperson, if I can try maybe to put Mr. Pukula, is indeed we had received his comments, and as the team, we had worked on his comments and ensure that they are incorporated, and hence that's why the number has changed. Chief, amongst the issue that was raised is that it was also raised in the meeting that whatever we are doing, we must ensure that deviations, we guard against deviations that will really land us in court. And there was a deviation around the use of EAF, and that deviation was taken to court, and the issue was settled. It was not the issue that we could defend, and hence we thought that it is not the approach that we can pursue, and that is why mainly on REP, the number that we are recommending has changed. So, Mr. Pukula, all the comments that you and the guidance you have provided, they were captured, and they are most of those comments.
Mr. Tivali, may I point of correction? I think members of the subcommittee, I would hate it to get to a point where you had seen a certain number and then somebody provides comments and then numbers get changed without you getting a feel or a view of why the numbers changed, whether you agreed, because I provided comments. I'm not the last word on this. And my discomfort around it is that the numbers, I mean, as we have seen, that in most cases we go back to say, just apply the methodology and this would be the answer. And there were other areas where we were wanting to put the issue of the EAF in the decision, and I was hoping that in this, that's what we are going to go through so that the other members can get that. But if that's not the case, I would be guided by you, Chair, and I apologize for coming in whilst Mr. Ntakeni was speaking. But I don't think the issue was just putting in my comments. The issue was raising those issues for the other members, because we didn't have another platform where we could raise those comments on.
Thank you, Mr. Pukula, for clarifying that, because, I mean, for instance, I've also guided the team that unless you can specifically indicate in the methodology where it empowers the energy regulator to deviate, then we do not deviate. So, in fact, I was hoping that Mr. Ntakeni, when he presents, I guess maybe that's what he was asking, whether he can present in detail, that they can indicate coming out of the workshop and the guidance that was provided by the workshop, including your further inputs, Mr. Pukula, how those were taken into account, such that when they come with this decision, which is different from the decision that they had originally put forward in the meeting of the 2nd of August, how those comments collectively of the members of the ELS, how all of those comments were tackled, such that we actually have a number. Ms. Masetti?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, that's what we would have expected, actually, so that the team can demonstrate that subsequent to or after the discussions at the workshop and the ELS meeting, these are the changes in what areas and what necessitated the changes or adjustments, and the extent of the adjustments that were made, and so that they can address us on those things. But indeed not to specify one particular member of the subcommittee to indicate that your comment were incorporated, and it's not even demonstrating to what extent, because we must all be comfortable with the decision that we take. So indeed, I appreciate that comment as well from Mr. Bokula. But Chairperson, I would like to make a request that at this stage, I do not think that it will be wise to even speak about deviating from the methodology, because should we think about deviation, we've got to follow due process. And I'm very worried if we're going to talk about deviation from the methodology. I think it will be wise if we adhere to the methodology in the way that we go about with the determination of the amount that is required for this RCA. So that's number one. And then the second thing, Chairperson, and this is also based on the High Court judgment, that even in areas where we may not agree with Eskom with regards to the amount that is requested, or any stakeholder for that matter, the judge said we must inform them before we take a final decision, just to inform the applicant that we do not agree with you, or will not provide what you have requested, and these are the sort of the considerations and all of that. So that is in the judgment that was delivered in March of 2020, if I'm not mistaken, by the High Court. So it's actually two things. The first one is the deviation from the methodology, which I would not support at this stage, Chairperson. I think we'll open ourselves up for legal challenge if we ever talk about deviation from the methodology without following due process and consulting specifically on such deviations and the reasons for deviations. So the second one then is also where we do not necessarily agree with what is requested, and just to indicate what are our reasons for that before we take a final decision, if those principles can be, Chairperson, taken into consideration as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you both to yourselves, Mr. Bokula and Madam Maseti, for the guidance. So, Ms. Ntageni, I think it really, maybe we are just trying to save time, but I think it's important that you go back and present and indicate what members' guidance, there was the guidance that members had provided, how that guidance was taken into account. But before you do, just what I do want to stress, and please do stress it as well in your responses, that yes, in terms of deviation, Madam Maseti and also Mr. Bokula and other members, we can assure you that the instruction was very, very clear to the team. We only deviate where the energy regulator is empowered to deviate. So there is no, in terms of the analysis, the basis of any deviation here is based 100% on the methodology. So if the methodology allows for a view, that view was then, for a review by the regulator, that view was taken into account. That's the first one. With your second comment, Madam Maseti, the reason why we also then say between now and ER, once this committee has adopted the actual recommendation, that recommendation, if there are any differences between what was applied for and what the decision entails, then it allows for the team to then engage between now and the ER. It allows for the team to then engage with the applicant in terms of where we actually differ, as I think we had taken that decision previously. That also is taken into account. But over to you, Mr. Ntaken. And you can seek assistance from the team in terms as you respond. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. I will not, the issues, all the issues that were raised by members, and apologies for flagging only one issue, all the issues that members were raised are captured under Table 2. If I will go through them, I think I might really take a bit of time, but I'm going to ask colleagues who has addressed those issues in their various action, as I indicated, as they are giving a brief presentation also indicate how the issues that members has raised were addressed. The first person who will assist each person will be Maria, followed by Dr. Kunjulayo, and he will be then followed by Mandla, and then Mr. Chabalala. In that order, Chairperson, if you allow.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair and members. Under operating expenditure, members had made comments regarding the main issue that members made comments on was on maintenance and the quality of maintenance as well as the scope. For this particular one, I'm just going to request Mr. Sandile Jacobs to elaborate on how this was addressed on the maintenance section. Thank you.
There is a suggestion, Mr. Tagini, because we've captured the responses, so that maybe if you can summarize, because I guess if you try to go through it in that level of detail, it may take a bit of time. Is that possible, Ms. Matlako? Maybe we can make reference to what is in the table and just summarize.
For this particular one, Chair, I'd really request Mr. Jacobs to just briefly, because I know that the members had, you know, a lot of them had issues around maintenance, and I'd request that he'd be best suited to address that. Thank
you. Thank you, Madam. Please proceed, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to maintenance issues that were raised, was that sorry, was deferred maintenance, and whether ESCOM has done justice to aggressive maintenance that has been done, and as to so that the usage of the OCGT was avoided. With regards to this, ESCOM has supplied the information the information with regards to maintenance on certain plants, and a total of 97 maintenance outages were planned, but only 13%, 13% or 13 of those maintenance were deferred. So when it comes to maintenance, there was maintenance that was done, and that maintenance was actually conducted. And we also requested some information from ESCOM with regards to this, and this information is planned to be submitted. I don't know if I should go into detail with this, looking at the time, but this issue was actually dealt with, and we are still waiting for some information from ESCOM so that we can actually clarify and give more information on this particular issue.
Right. By the way, can I guide Ms. Ntakeni, can we use an 80-20 rule? I mean, there are those items that are substantive in terms of how can we focus on those rather? For instance, yeah, in terms of primary energy and I guess expenditure did fall, maintenance fell under expenditure. But if we can maybe just try to focus on those items that are major ticket items. Thank you. Over both to you, Mr. Ntakeni and Ms. Matlako.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Maybe just to conclude on expenditure, the issue under employee benefit costs, there were issues as well, but the issue was more of a legal nature, and we indicated that we are seeking advice from the legal, and legal indicated that the matter is undergoing legal processes, so it cannot be addressed through the RCA, so it should wait for legal. And then the other issue was also to ensure that we stick to the methodology and not use any other approach that is not in the methodology, and that was addressed. If we can move then, Chairperson, to the next one, I said it was sales, if Dr. Kunjulayo can take over the sales.
Yeah, good morning. Quickly, Chair. So the questions around sales are covered under on page 7 of 119. So the question there was around the fixed cost argument, and the question was, did we in the assessment of fixed and variable cost take into account whether the assets were used? So our response there is that because we used the decision that was applicable at the time, and that decision is based on allowing a return based on the principle around that assets that are allowed to any return should have been used and usable. So on that basis, we state that that fixed variable determination is based on a decision that was applicable at the time, having assessed the assets for usability. The other issue that was raised was around the price elasticity, which is on page 8 of 119 of the table. And the question there was that we need to find a way of adjusting for price elasticity when we decide how much to allow to Eskom in terms of the sales variance. And the response there is that there is no specific provision in terms of the methodology on how we should be doing this, and also the extent to which we can quantify the impact of prices on the revenue variance. At the moment, we don't have a specific mechanism to quantify this, so we cannot adjust for price elasticity at this point in time, but would consider this in future versions of the methodology. So, Chair, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson. Perhaps if we can move quickly to primary energy, where maybe we can also touch on the issue of OCGT. Mandla?
All right. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Ntakeni, right? I'll let Mr. Matome of Wiswa just update on the issues raised under OCGTs, although they were not substantial. If I recall very well, it was just linking OCGTs to the production plan and making a link in between the two. But I stand to be corrected by my colleagues. I'll give over to Wiswa or Matome to just update.
Mr. Copper, Madam Akuban, please proceed. Remembering that we are looking at the existing methodology, not any other thing, right? It must be premised on what is what the methodology allows. Are they on the call? Yes, Madam, please proceed.
In terms of assessing the OCGT cost, the methodology was followed to the T, and that is what gave the adjustment that is being made. So there's been no deviations. We took into account the provisions of the methodology, and it is linked to the production plan in terms of the analysis of the actuals. So I'm not sure what else to highlight.
No, that's fine. If that's sufficient, members can indicate if it's not sufficient. So it's saying it's linked to the methodology. Whatever the adjustments we've made were predicated on what was in the methodology and based on what had been approved in terms of MYPD4, correct?
Correct.
All right, correct. Mr. Ntakeni?
Yes, Chairperson. The last one is yes. The last one is the return. If Thabo Chabalala, you can take us through.
Thank you, Mr. Ntakeni. On this one, Eskom has applied in line with, as we can see in table 7 or page 28 of 118 in the submission. So, NASA, we are actually satisfied that the actual balances applied for by Eskom actually closely resemble the 2021 decision and lower in most instances. So, the recommended decision is on the same table, and we are saying that there were no deviations from the methodology that have been implemented in the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Ntakeni. Thank you, Chairperson. Apologies.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ntakeni, do you want to wrap up on this? so we can take it to the members and see if members are satisfied.
No, we are fine, Chairperson. Those are the issues that were addressed in the revised RFT. Thank you.
Thank you, members. That is how the team dealt with it. Madam Massetti, any further comments, questions?
Chairperson, as you summarize, I think it will be useful for the team, as they've indicated this, to actually show on that table 2 these issues that they had to consider as raised by the members, those adjustments that they made there, because at the end of the day, we are required to approve those figures, and there were certain adjustments. So in the way that they've considered this, they must then, the explanation must then be aligned to that table to show then the extent to which such comments were considered, and the fact that they resulted in some further adjustments that had to be made subsequent or after the workshop and the meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Chotler wants to add?
No, Chair, it's just to confirm from the leadership point of view that what Ms. Massetti is requesting, you can put it on my shoulders, and then we'll make sure that on the very same table, and not just put the general statements on the table itself, or where we're dealing with members' comments, will also show that the original number was this much, and then because of that, or the direction given by the members, the number has now changed to whatever it is. That will be, and we'll reference it also back to the final decision table. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shotlo. Just, I think, as my parting shot, before I take this matter for a decision, for members to make a decision, can we be assured, because there's still there's a huge gap between what ESCOM applied for and what we are recommending for a decision to ER. Can we be assured that all of those adjustments that were made there, those significant adjustments, are actually, Mr. Sejotlo, can you assure the members that all of the adjustments that are there, that have been proposed, are actually predicated on the MYPD4 methodology?
Yeah, yes, I can assure that, and as we say now, if in fact, even in explaining the changes or the adjustments that we have done, we will actually also relate it to the section of the methodology that applies for that particular adjustment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, members, there we have it. Apologies, it took forever. I guess we need to be thorough and not just be driven by time. So members, if I can take you to a decision, which is on page 10 of 10 or 10 of 119, paragraph 15, that we are requested to recommend this decision to the ER for approval in terms of the recovery of MYPD4 RCA for the financial year 2020-21, and also the reasons for decisions. That will then be published later, of course, after all of the other processes that need to be taken into account. Members, would you be comfortable to take a decision on this by a show of hands, members? It is delayed, by the way. It's been standing for quite a while. Thank you, Madam Massetti.
Mr. Gumede, I am going to approve, but for me, when I don't have the reasons for that decision and the alignment to that, because I've been thinking that maybe it's my board pack that's doing this, I'm going to have to do that reluctantly just to get this to progress.
I would really appreciate that, Mr. Pugula, but as basically indicated by Mr. Chotlo, is because at least we don't have the numbers as yet, and they still need to then engage ESCOM post this decision before the decision goes to ER. So if maybe let's just say, just to give you comfort, Mr. Pukula, that maybe and other members, that table, as requested by Madam Massetti, will then be updated in terms of the numbers, what were the original numbers and what were the adjustments made. And so by the time we actually take this matter to ER, that would have been taken into account. And also included in that would have been the outcome of the engagement between the team and ESCOM. Would that suffice? Would that be okay to you, Mr. Pukula? If we make that undertaking.
Chairperson, yes, it will be, because I think I have an interest in getting this done. But I'm doing this for the progress of this meeting. But I am reluctant to do that without the reasons for the decision.
Understand. So, Mr. Chotlo and the team, that's so it falls on us to actually make sure that we actually include those decisions and they are clear, so that by the time this matter serves before ER, all of the actual reasons have been clarified. Thank you. Can I then again, perhaps, I saw your hand, Madam Sbia, was that in support of the decision to recommend to ER?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Nkize, are you still with us? Maybe not. I also support with that, with those recommendations, Mr. Chotlo, with that guidance from members, so that at least by the time this matter serves before ER, those reasons would have been better clarified. Thank you, members. It's taking a long time. It's a difficult one, I think, largely because of the discrepancies between what is applied for and the number that is proposed. And hopefully, in whatever that we do, we're not going to end up in court again because we deviated from the methodology. Thank you, members. So, can I then go back to item number 14, members, which is now the implementation. You can just make a quick recap, Mr. Ntakeni. We have now discussed item 13. And maybe justify, as Madam Maseti was saying, please justify. If you are saying it's 1 year, why 1 year? If it's not 2 years, whatever, taking into account the impact on consumers and so forth and so forth. Over to you again, Mr. Ntakeni.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Maybe if I can then run quickly to the issue of justification. I had already indicated that this implementation plan relates to the RCA that has been approved, the 1920 RCA, and then this one that we just dealt with, which is 2021, and the government injections. So the proposal is to get these two RCAs on table 1 of the RFD, to get these RCAs to be recovered in a period of a 1 year. And the reasons, as I indicated, is that liquidating or delaying RCAs has a better negative impact on the GDP at the current moment. But when we look into the future, the impact this impact is a short-term solution rather than to have a long-term solution to get the RCA liquidated within 1 year. And the effect is, if we delay it affects not only the current customer, also the future customers get also affected. The sustainability and the affordability analysis was done. It was done based on the recommended numbers of the MYPD 5 numbers that we are going to recommend. So they are captured in the submission under section, if I can take the member to that section, the section that deals with all the option, section 6, liquidating the balance over the 1 year. So we'll have motivation for this option 1, we'll have motivation for option 2 and the option 3, because we had provided those 3 options where we liquidate the RCA either over the period of 1 year, or over the period of 2 years, or over the period of 3 years. And we are recommending the option 1, which is to liquidate over the period of 1 year, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ntakeni. Members, can I take it back to you again? Because now there's a proper background. We've dealt with the other RCA. So the proposal by the team, as in the decision, is to liquidate both RCAs over 1 year. We unfortunately the other amount, the government injection, that's an output of a court order, and we've delayed those 23 billion rands from many years ago. So that we actually can't exactly do anything about. Those amounts, which are 14 billion, we can mention those because those are public record numbers. It's the 14.23 billion in terms of standard customers, but it's 15 billion overall. So, members, any comments on this item? Further comments on this item? Implementation over 1 year for these two RCAs. There's a justification from the team. By show of hands, members, if there are. Madam Assetti.
Chairperson, I just want to get clarification here on paragraph 4.5, paragraph A, where we state that after such time, NERSA has determined the allowable revenue for 2023 financial year, 24, 25, and up to 26. The following sum will be added to the determinations, and we state the amounts there. They are not highlighted in yellow, but I would not mention them, but I think there are certain amounts that are stipulated there. And I just want to understand, first of all, those amounts, but also I see that they are resulting from the court order. However, I just want to understand whether this is a decision that is required from us as well, to say that these specific amounts will be added in future when we make decisions for the revenue requirements of Eskom for those years that are specified there. Is that what is expected of us, Chairperson? Because if that paragraph is included, it will mean that we make this decision also which then state that such amounts will be included. I'm not sure if we need to make such determination at this point in time, especially if we are also embarked on other processes to revise the approach in which we come up with tariffs in terms of Section 15 of the Electricity Regulation Act. I just want to understand the preemption of the decisions, the future decisions of NERSA, number one, but also whether we are making this decision in 4.5 sub A. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Assetti. Mr. Ntakeni, want to venture? We may assist.
Yes, Chairperson. This paragraph talks to the 15 billion, which relate to the government injection, which I think already is a known figure. So we are trying to give a background of where it comes from. It is not the determination that we are making. It is a court order that we add back those amounts, which will at the end will sum up to the 69 billion that was deducted. Chairperson, thank you.
Madam Assetti, maybe just to clarify, if you recall, we have that amount of 69 billion, of which 59 billion is outstanding, and that a decision was that issue was taken to court for a decision to be reviewed and set aside, and unfortunately, we then ended up with another disagreement on that issue with Eskom, which was appealed, and but we then settled on that matter, where the 23 billion was not just going to be added as 23 billion to the revenues, recovered as 23 billion, but the settlement was that it would be spread over 4 years, hence the 15 billion. But that is it's not a matter that is up for a decision at this meeting. It's a matter that had been previously. This is a court order that takes into account previous decisions of NERSA. So those what the team is saying, over and above whatever that would have been decided in terms of revenue for 23-24 or for 24-25, or even in future years, assuming that we are continuing with the same revenue approach, the MYPD approach in the future years, is that those are the numbers that will be added onto whatever decisions that are arrived at for those years. Plus, on top of that, these 2 RCAs that we've just now considered as well. So that's what that paragraph is actually referring to. So it really takes into account and say, yes, there's going to be a revenue decision, but on top of that revenue decision in terms of what was applied for 23-24 and 24-25, we're going to then add those numbers as per the decision of the courts. I'm hoping that's clear.
It's clear, Chairperson. I just wanted just the understand. I do understand that it is the 69 billion, but just the approach in the implementation of that 69 billion that we have chosen, the phased-in approach in terms of the implementation, and also that it is the decision that in the way that it will be implemented, it will be added in those years. That was just the issue that I wanted to clarify. Thanks, Chair.
Correct, Madam. Thank you. Members, any other clarification on this item? If not, can I then take you to the decision that is sought? By the way, what page is it? So on page 10 or 10 of 52. Again, this needs to be recommended. It's the implementation that needs to be recommended to ER. And in fact, the recommendation is to implement those balance in 1 year, those RCA balances in 1 year, then of course to then add those 15 billion as per the decision of the courts. So members, I see no other comments or questions. Can I then take you to the decision? And by show of hands, members, if you can then show your support of that decision, that we implement those under 1 year. Oh, Mr. Pukula. Oh, and this, we need you for that other one, Mr. Pukula. Jeez. Okay. It's that decision on 12 that we require your support on as well. Thanks, Mr. Pukula. Thanks, Ms. Leah. Thanks, Madam Maseti, also support. Because I guess if you sign off, Mr. Pukula, I think we may struggle with
quorum.
With quorum, yes.
Sure.
Anyway, let's quickly. Oh, you're back.
I'm back. I've just joined now. As
So okay.
Thank you, Advocate Sithole. It's a bit of an emergency, Chairperson, that I must attend to at home, but so please excuse me.
All right, thank you. If you can rejoin us, because I think I'm going to request members for a bit more time for the other matters that we're going to deal with in camera. But if we can then go, thanks, Mr. Pukula, for alerting us. But let's see whether this cannot be presented on time for you, at least to be able to mull over. Mr. Mavuso, item 12.
Item 12 should be the multi-year application for 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025, and it is going to be presented by Madam Masike.
Thank you, Madam Masike. Over to you. If we can deal with it in that structured format as we had discussed, sales, production, whatever, so at least there is a bit of a flow in it. Over to you, Madam Masike.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good day, members. Good day, colleagues. The purpose of the submission is to request ELS to recommend to the AR the draft decision and the reasons for decision, which is, sorry.
Mrs. Shishotlo, you mute yourself, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, the draft decision and the draft RFD, which is attached as Annex A. In terms of the delegation matrix, ELS is delegated to make recommendations on this one to the ER. The application was assessed using the MYPD4 methodology, and I can confirm that there is no deviation from this methodology. The revenue application was received on the 2nd of June 2021. And then there were assumptions that were submitted on the 22nd of, in January 2022. And then also Eskom sent an addendum, like a revised application on the 14th of September 2022. The addendum is the basis for the analysis of this application. We followed a consultation process in order to collate comments from stakeholders. The consultation paper was published on the 29th of July 2022, wherein the public had until the 8th of September to make representations. And then we had public hearings on the 19th to the 23rd of September 2022. We are anticipating that the regulator will take a decision on the matter on the 29th of November 2022. We do have the team that can provide details of how the application was treated and the approach was taken. But yeah, the numbers that are proposed, we are requesting that they be kept confidential until the decision on the 29th of November. So I'm going to follow the process that we followed when we had the meeting the other day. The section that we're going to start with in terms of presenting and explaining to the members what approach was taken and how we came to the certain number. We will start with the RAB, but maybe in terms of RAB, before Thabo Chabalala starts to talk about it, maybe we should ask Mr. Murati to talk about the court judgment that we had for year one on RAB, because it also forms the basis of the analysis for this one. Mr. Murati, please. Thank you.
Chair, I've been ambushed on this one, but I will try to get to it because I didn't have the judgment opened with me, because it will just be reading the actual judgment. But the issue that has been raised in the order was the issue that sorry, Chair. To go through that, the decision that was taken on the RAB, that it should be reviewed and set aside. The second part was that the decision in that the decision that is reviewed and set aside, it will not have a retrospective effect on the 9.61% price increase that was granted. It was also highlighted that we will have to apply the 2016 methodology when we have to determine the RAB for the subsequent year 23-24. And also that the RAB values as determined by NERSA for 23, you need to using the steps undertaken must be reviewed and decided on as reflected in the paragraph 6. Paragraph 6, chairperson of the order listed a couple of things that NERSA had to take, and that we if I may just highlight, probably I would have just flighted it so that members could see how the order is, but I can quickly go through the 7 items that were listed in paragraph 6 of the order. One being that NERSA is ordered to ensure that only commissioned assets are included in the replacement cost new determination, and the assets with the construction periods of longer than 12 months and which are still included in the works under construction category be valued at their book value, excluding capitalized interest during construction until they're transferred to the category of commissioned assets. That we should reverse the flue gas desulfurization adjustment incorrectly made at the time. That we should redetermine the accumulated depreciation adjustment made, including to ensure that correct remaining useful lives are used to determine the accumulated depreciation as at 31st March 2020 to ensure that power stations will not have negative RAB values, but have values at 31st March 2020, commensurate with the RCN times the ratio of remaining useful life to total useful life. We were also ordered to ensure that the correct remaining useful lives for each year are used when the roll forward depreciation is undertaken from 31st March 2023 to determine the RAB value as at 31st March 2022. This will further ensure that power stations will not have a negative RAB value, but have values at each year and commensurate with that. We're also ordered to comply with the methodology, the issue that with regards to the EAF adjustment made for all ESCOM generators, that we were also required to include completed generation, transmission, and distribution assets values that were not included in the RAB value determined made in the financial year 22-23. NERSA we are also required to include the book value, excluding capitalized interest during construction, of all assets with construction periods of longer than 12 months and which are still included under the work category of generation, transmission, and distribution assets as at 31st March 2023 in the determination of the RAB value for the financial year 22-23. We were also ordered to redetermine the RAB value as 31st March 2020, once NERSA has redetermined the RAB value as at 31st March 2023. Similar approaches based on ESCOM revenue application for financial year 2023-24 and 24-25 will be used to determine the RAB valuations for this particular financial year. So that is how the court order goes in this regard, in regard to the RAB. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murati. I would then like to ask Mr. Chabalala to take us through the approach he used to assess the RAB for these 2 financial years. Thanks, Mr. Chabalala. Over to you.
Thank you. So I think Mr. Murati has covered most of the aspects entailed in the RAB section, but I think what I would just want to add on to that is to say that so when ESCOM applied originally, it undertook a RAB revaluation, and this is as required by the MYPD4 methodology, and then NERSA made a determination on this revaluation. So, however, since ESCOM has challenged this decision in court and the parties have agreed to settle on this matter rather than litigate, in fact, without repeating what Mr. Murati had already indicated, I just want to highlight to say that the challenge was mainly around NERSA adjusting the ESCOM RAB regulatory asset base based on its planned performance. As you can recall, we used to use, or we initially used the EAF or the energy availability factor, and other adjustments which were not stated explicitly in the MYPD4 methodology. So because the parties have decided to settle on the matter, we have made a determination on the ESCOM re-evaluation without any of those additional adjustments outside of the MYPD4 methodology, which is in line with the court order. So as a result, our recommended RAB decision is in line with Table 7, which is what, page 28 of 707. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. May we please then ask Ms. Nkopo to take us through the approach used to determine work?
Thank you, Chairperson. With regards to work, ESCOM has applied for a work of 11.5, and then NERSA had to calculate its own work based on the methodology, which amounts to 11.4, and there's a difference of 0.10, which is due to the change in the inflation used by NERSA based on the recent market data. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Madam Masike, please clarify this, because that's not what appears. I think, as we've indicated, that's what was calculated, but that's not what was applied for. Is it correct?
Have you, sir?
I'm saying, if you look at the work the number that may appear in the decision or even in the application, if we look even on the table on page 25 of 707, that the work that is applied for there is different from the number, or is it the same? I'm just saying that there's a number that was applied for that we are saying is 11%, but in fact, in terms of what was actually effectively applied for, is a different number, correct? Or am I not correct?
Yes, Chairperson. I think Nersa can
Please clarify that, yeah.
Mr. Chotlo would like to assist.
I think you're done, Ms. Masiki. I think the only reason is just to ensure that there is affordability and no price spikes, and that's why we adjusted it. And we've done this before, and Eskom has not had any problems in that approach. So the risk in anything else here is very low. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Chotlo. Can we please then move on to sales forecast, Dr. Kunjulayo?
Yes, good morning again. So in terms of the sales, we noted that the trend that we've seen over the MIPD4 in terms of the decline in sales continues. So in terms of the sales, the biggest drivers in terms of the decline, it's the industrial and mining customers as well as distributors. But in the decision, we did not adjust as Eskom sales forecast. We accepted it, and the reason is that over the years we've seen that the variance between the sales forecast and the actual sales has been very minor, and we also noticed that the variance between our own sales forecast and Eskom sales forecast is very small. So we accepted the sales forecast for 23-24, which is on page 64 of 707. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. K. Ms. Magubani, production plan, please.
Thanks. So in terms of the production planning process, it starts with the sales forecast, which Dr. Kunjulayo has spoken to, that we are aligned with the forecasted numbers that Eskom applied for. It then follows that we have the energy wheel that is shown on page 55 and 56, which then seeks to match the forecasted demand with the available generation. Also to highlight that the methodology requires that Eskom must furnish the energy regulator with a risk-adjusted production plan and energy wheel that is aligned to the forecasted sales. And by risk-adjusted, we mean that it must take into account the most recent information, and it must take into account the most realistic assumptions in terms of what the plant performance will be. And then to also just indicate that when comparing the application, the initial application that was made by Eskom compared to the revised application, given the time that has passed, the biggest drivers for the energy shortfalls are due to the IPP program that has faced delays to the extent of some above 10 terawatt hours for each of the application years. There's also been a decline in the EAF that's been assumed. But how Eskom mitigated for that was to increase their utilization of their coal fleet in particular, so that the net impact is that there's an increase in generation from the coal fleet. It's also highlighted that the use of SWPs was used just to ensure that there is sufficient capacity to meet the demand. And what we are highlighting is that the decision that the regulator must make must ensure that the demand supply balance is met. And because we are comfortable that all available capacity within the system have been taken into account, we do note the increase in OCGT usage, but that is mainly to ensure that the decision we make ensures security of supply, because failing to do so will then mean that we are making a decision that ensures that the system operator must load shed, and that given the rise in load shedding, we wouldn't want to make a decision that exacerbates that. And then we are highlighting also that the protection plan then feeds into the primary energy components of the application, which then look into the cost of making those resources available to meet demand. Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Magubane. I see there's a message on the chat that says we must only deal with the big ticket items, but I think, yeah, it's fine. Mr. Mandla can then take us through primary energy because it's also one of those big ticket items. Mr. Mandla?
Madam Speaker, remember what we then said, as long as we don't lose the members. For instance, I like the idea that says these are the sales forecast. We made adjustment to that as we've spoken to. Now, this is the production plan to meet those sales, and then we take into account all of the other issues, including the IPPs, such that when we then reach the other decisions we make, it's in line with that flow. We should not lose members on that, please.
Okay, thanks for the guidance, Mr. Gumede. We will then follow it as originally planned. Mr. Mandla, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Leoma. So the application by Eskom, what they applied for under primary energy is provided on page 74, according to Adobe Reader pages, and then according to the numbers on the page, page 64. So that is what Eskom had applied for, and there were no adjustments made to the application under coal usage, water treatment, OCGTs. And the main reasons for no adjustment under OCGTs, although they substantially increased following the updated information, have already been provided by Ms. Magubane, and they are mainly to ensure that supply and demand meet. So yeah, that's in a nutshell the primary energy section. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Mandla. Can we then move on to international purchases, Dr. Kasheka?
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Lihumoya. Yes, with the international purchases, we didn't adjust, but there was a concern from the stakeholders that there's been an increase compared to the previous years of MRPD. That is the last or the first year of MRPD 5. But then we had a meeting with Eskom in order to get clarification as to what led to the increases in terms of the volumes, or not volumes, or the amount applied for. So they did indicate that every 5 years there is a contract review in terms of the price. This looks at the cost of sales, that is the energy that is sold, and because of the assumptions that have changed in terms of the input cost, there's been an increase, and this is indicated on the last table of the decision. Thank you, Chairperson.
IPPs, Mr. Hore. Am I?
Thank you. Thank you. On the IPPs, Eskom revised its application, its initial application, because in its initial application, it had some assumptions on some future bidding rounds that were evident that they will not materialize. So during public hearings and as responses to a lot of stakeholder as well as members' questions, Eskom revised its applications as per table 68. And on the revised applications, if I may just mention, mostly the bid Windows 6 to 8, as well as small-scale renewable projects, were revised and were noted that they would not materialize in the application period. NESA, in turn, we also made one adjustment to the risk mitigation program, where we also realized that there are some projects that are not going to materialize, but there are some that are going to materialize in the second year of this application. But in the first year, all applications are not going to materialize, and the numbers are covered on table 68, and those are the adjustments that we made. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Liburu, environmental levy.
Thank you, Lihuma. Good afternoon, colleagues. In terms of the environmental levy, the methodology requires that the levies and taxes be treated as a pass-through cost in the determination of the MYPD. The principle here is that at the production level, that's where the levies will be raised. So the allowed environmental levy costs are linked to the recommended production plan. So as a result, there are no adjustments made in terms of the allowed environmental levy. The recommended decision is on table 71, page 91. Thank you.
Thank you. I will talk to the carbon tax. In terms of carbon tax, Eskom applied for 0, and it is the National Treasury has deferred carbon tax to 2026. So in line with that, there is no allowance given for both years. Thanks, Chair. And then we can move on to the next one. Is it OPEX?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lihuma.
Okay, yes, Ms. Masaku, thanks.
Under operating expenditure, Eskom applied for an amount of 69.6 billion for 2024 and 72.9 billion for 2025. In terms of the year-on-year increases, so overall increase for 2024, there's a decline in costs of 3.77%. And for 2025 financial year, there's an increase, overall increase of costs of 4.79%. So I'll just touch the components where there has been adjustments made. The first one is under employee benefits costs. Under this section, following section 10.4.2 of the methodology, the cost for manpower have been limited to inflation increase, and the adjustments are shown on the summary table. And then the next component where there are adjustments is under other operating costs. In this section, we follow section 10.3 of the methodology, and there has been adjustments made to some of the other cost components, adjusted by CPI to get to an allowed amount that is also reflected on the summary table. Under arrear debt, there's nothing that has been allowed for the 2 years, and this was done in agreement with Eskom. So overall, there's a summary table that shows all the adjustments for the 2 components that is shown on page 135 of 707. Yes, that's it for under operating costs. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ms. Matlaku. Can we move on to R&D, Mr. Murweng?
Good afternoon, team. On the R&D, Eskom applied for an increase for 2024 for 135 million, and for 25, 142. There was no change on the new adjusted application. So the amount was granted based on the reasons given by Eskom, and also that because of the split of the divisions, they will spend the money in different divisions. For example, under generation, they'll spend 56% of the money allocated. Transmission, they'll spend 24%, and distribution, they will spend 20%. So there was no change in the application. The amount that was applied for was given. It's on table 98 of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Depreciation, I think Thabo would have touched on it when he did RAP, but Can I just confirm, Thabo, do you have any specific things you want to say here?
Not particularly. Remember, as I had presented around the RABs to say that there's a court order out, so we followed the instruction of the courts. Thank you.
Thank you. And then economic impact would have been addressed in the implementation plan that was discussed earlier. Chairperson, may I indicate that the document is yet to be reviewed by the language editor, and all the editorials error referencing will be corrected before the submission goes to ER. And then the recommendations are on page 8 to 10 of 707 of the submission. I will pause here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Masike. Thank you to the team for the presentation. Members, I know it's been a lengthy presentation, but I thought it would be useful that we follow it. But I think the point that I just wanted to re-emphasize is that in dealing with this, firstly, no deviations, that we agreed on that, unless those deviations are actually empowered by the MYPD4. For instance, the issue in dealing with salary increases, MYPD makes reference to the use of inflation. So that was what the adjustments were made on that basis. So that's the first issue. But secondly, the issue that has been stressed, I think maybe not stressed enough by Vuiswa, is that in the main here, there are projected sales. Firstly, as indicated by Dr. K, that we did not make adjustments in terms of what was projected by Eskom. Linked to the sales, then we'll have the production plan. But the production plan is influenced by a number of things: plant availability, IPPs, international purchases, and I don't think, Ms. Masike, you guys talked to the STPPs, unless you included those under IPPs. And once we have that production plan, if there's a shortfall, or that production plan then influences the primary energy, including the use of OCGT, says that we cannot plan as the energy regulator if there are sales projections and there's a production plan. When we look at what is being applied for in how we meet the sales, we must make sure that we do not approve something that amounts to us as the regulator approving a production that will result in load shedding. Hence, the amount that was applied for in terms of OCGT, and that was recommended by the team. I just thought I would stress this. The other issue that I do want to stress, colleagues, and I do want you guys to do this calculation properly. Okay, thank you. So the STPPs are covered under IPPs. Thank you, Mr. Hore. The thing that I do want to stress is that although the calculated work is 11%, but in terms of what Eskom applied for, they did not apply for the full 11%. I think I need to stress this, colleagues. They applied for 1.7, because if you basically multiply the REP, the net depreciated regulatory asset base, and multiply that figure by 11%, you'll get a very different number to the number that appears on the table. The number that appears on the table is that we take the REP and multiply by 1.7%, because that's what they applied for. But it's what Eskom applied for, colleagues. It's not just what NERSA decided on. So I did want to stress that, and please, Ms. Masike, please guys check that number, because there is always a miscommunication. The calculated work is 11%, but Eskom has not applied for the full 11% because of affordability. They've applied for 1.7%, and it is that 1.7% that appears on that number. So I just thought I'll just clear that, members, and then I'll open up this discussion. Any questions, members? Taking into account, Madam Maseti, I did see your concern. You are being load-shedded, and therefore you may not be able to. I still hope that you are still with us, because if you're not, then we'll probably lose the quorum.
Yes, yes, Chairperson, I'm still here, Chair. Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I would like to start off with the final point that you made, and that final point that you made, even when Eskom did not apply for that 11%, I think it is important that we always even if we accept the fact that it has not applied for that 11%, there is a specific language in the methodology and sections in the methodology that seek to balance, the interest of consumers, and also not to, prevent a situation where the entity, and in this case it will be Eskom, the entity over recovers. There's that section that deals with it, with the over recovery and all of that, and I think it might assist in explaining the fact that 1.7% has been applied for, even though the calculation takes us to 11%, and that is within the context of balancing the interest of the applicant and the provider of the regulated service, which is Eskom in this case, but also the consumer, so that it is not just an issue that appears to be a positive consideration on the part of Eskom, but also because we've got a regulatory framework that seeks to assist the regulator in executing its regulatory task. So it's important that that part be also explained within the context of those sections in the methodology. I think that is very important, Chairperson, so that it is not just a question of us putting it as though it is Eskom and therefore we just accepted it in that manner, but within that balance that we need to create as guided by the methodology, and that methodology is also taken from the context of the EPP. So I would like that maybe that part, when we get to that part in the analysis and the RFDs, that it be emphasized. The second issue, Chairperson, that I would like to emphasize here, Chair, I know that as we, part of this cost are costs that have been incurred, and part of them are costs to be incurred in the future. But it is important that we do always, at least in the way that we analyze, take into account the efficiency factor as well as the prudency test. In a way, just to speak about that, it's very important because we're going to face a situation as we take this decision, maybe today and on the 22nd of November, a situation where we know for the fact that some of these figures are not going to materialize, Chairperson. These are assumptions that were made perhaps a year or almost 2 years ago, and some of them may not necessarily materialize, and they might actually even result in huge RCA applications. But we know that we're taking these decisions in a situation where we are experiencing, unprecedented incidents of load shedding. It has been intensified. And what does that mean in terms of what we're looking at today? We're looking at the situation where even the OCGT cost might be quite massive, Chairperson, to compensate for the poor performance of the coal plants. So it might actually be very good to look at what are these OCG costs that we're looking at, that we applied for when Eskom submitted its application, and also just to comment on the situation as we have it or experienced it as of today in the country. So just to see the extent to which the OCGT plants will actually compensate for the poor coal performance. And that is very important in our analysis, because we should also be in a position to say, how do we prevent this situation, or at least ameliorate this situation as the regulator, so that we reduce the cost to consumers? Then that is where we will actually apply ourselves also to issues of maintenance as we take this decision, to say, how can maintenance be improved here, the maintenance regime, and how it's supposed to at least, and even the maintenance budget, so that it can at least ameliorate the situation that we might actually see. And I'm not hearing the team applying themselves in that manner as the regulator. We analyze the situation for the future tariff that must be, or the revenue that is required for 2023 and 2024 going forward. How do we arrest the situation going forward, at least just to improve? I'm not hearing that, Chairperson. And that also goes with prudency test as well as the efficiency test, because we know that those OCGT costs are not, at least that might not be prudent, especially if certain things that ought to have been done are not done. And we know that there will be unnecessary costs that are incurred if those things are not done. So it's something that we need to reflect here in the analysis. To reflect that again, Chairperson, and our law allows us to do so, that we must also, perhaps in every revenue requirement application, and this is done also by regulatory authorities around the world, we should also in this analysis at least identify areas of improvements and set some improvement targets for Eskom. In a sense, if the team should be, the team should be skillful enough to understand by now what are some of the improvement targets that we can set as a regulator for Eskom, especially in areas where there are significant risk that result in massive cost for the consumer. And that is allowed in terms of our law. And I haven't heard the technical team here talking to that at all. It's as if we just look what Eskom is saying and then at least Eskom agrees with this. It is very wrong if we come across like that, because it's as if now we are cornered in a situation where we want to do things that will appease Eskom only as long as we're aligned with Eskom, so that we avoid a situation where we could be taken to court and actually lose in court. But some of these decisions, we've never even appealed them. And it seems now we are put on a back foot. And actually even our image will tend to be dented. And now it doesn't empower us or the team that makes these assessments, because it's as if now even things that we could have questioned, we are worried because we just want to do them in a way that Eskom wanted them and because Eskom won in court. Even if there are certain judgments that were taken, Chairperson, particularly on the issue of the regulatory asset base again, it does not mean that we must ignore what the guidance that we have in the methodology. Let's look at that within the context of what the methodology requires. Because I'm very worried when we quickly now say, yes, the court said this, and in certain areas we only say, oh, we've done it the way that Eskom also, and Eskom has not questioned it. I'm very worried if the regulator is going to take that posture. It is worrying. Because we don't come across as people that have done our own independent due diligence. And that due diligence that we've embarked on is where we also come out in our own words saying that in terms of the law, this is what is required, and also the regulatory framework, rather than just emphasize the reasoning with what Eskom wants or what Eskom would have wanted. If we take that posture that does not always state the reasoning that is justified by our own regulatory framework, I get worried, Chairperson. And I would like to emphasize that at least let us hear the team, because we read what is before us. But it is also very important, and because it doesn't come out in the submission, it is very important that the team, when it comes out, it must link up everything that they have made the analysis to what is what we are permitted to do. Then on the issue of the sales target, Chairperson, as we spoke about the production plan, and remember the production plan must also, in a way, influenced largely by the availability of the coal fleet, and especially because it must be aligned to the rules for dispatching of the plants. So now that there is load shedding, do we believe that this production plan that informs the sales targets, that production plan is realistic and it will achieve those targets? Because it is part of us engaging in a robust manner with that assumption that is put before us, and not just accept that assumption. We know that it will be influenced by those factors. Have we then looked at it and given the performance that is there currently, that that production plan, indeed, it will achieve the intended outcomes in terms of the sales. Is that the case? Are we certain about that? Will those figures, that the sales figures, will they materialize? If we look at the production plan, look at the extent of load shedding and the performance and availability of the coal plants, is that realistic? Will we achieve those assumptions? I'm not hearing that, Chairperson, because I don't think that it has been taken into consideration, at least as we take decisions. And it will be very wrong if we ignore that fact as we see it today. And this also affected, in any event, the financial year 2022-2023. Why would we ignore it? Because it still persists, that challenge. Why would we then ignore it for the financial year 2023-24 and 2024-25, Chair? In terms of these assumptions, the ability of these assumptions to materialize. Now, Chairperson, having said that, assume that we have some doubts and we are thorough in that production plan in terms of scrutinizing it, Chairperson, independently, and maybe saying that perhaps for this to materialize, at least they will need to make some improvements in terms of maintenance or other things that they may need to do. Then it will have to then look at the risk that of the inefficiencies, inefficiencies that will then cause the massive usage of the OCGT. But look, there I'm worried about the cost, Chairperson, because it comes at a cost and it's quite huge. So that again is a risk, and we should also look at the extent to which OCGTs will compensate for that poor coal plant performance, and they must go hand in hand. And I'm not hearing that kind of a discussion, and I will be very happy if that could be explained for me, Chair. And also just to reconcile the fact that there is load shedding and that potential overusage of the OCGT and the cost and the affordability the country having as the country endures the intensified load shedding, but also the cost that comes with the OCGTs. I would like to stop here, Chairperson, but as I stop, Chairperson, can we also be informed by the team regarding the extent to which the methodology talks about the regulatory asset base, determination, the value of the regulatory asset base, the way that it is determined, and the extent to which, even if the court says, well, on the RAB, let us not do this, or maybe let's compensate Eskom. But to what extent do we consider efficiency factor as well as performance factor? Because those things are important, and I don't think that the court necessarily says that irrespective of the fact that the asset is not performing, because the important thing is that the asset must perform, because you compensate the asset that has performed so that there is service that is provided. Now, if we ignore the efficiency factor, we ignore the performance factor, then we say that let us just compensate that asset, even if that asset is not valuable. What are we saying about these two factors to be considered, and also as part of the methodology? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Maseti. Any other comments, members, questions? Before I put it to the team, Advocate.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to the ELR team for a comprehensive presentation. Chair, I just want to get clarity on some of the presentation or sections of the presentation that I missed from the team. The first one being that Ms. Makubane indicated how the issue of load shedding is taken into account in the application, and I just missed that part, Chairperson. If she can just assist me in repeating what she has said. And the second point, Chair, is on the work. And I heard Ms. Utabisa indicating that the difference between what Eskom has applied for and what NERSA has calculated was very minimal. And it was also indicated that there was some agreement reached with Eskom on this particular matter. I just wanted to check whether that agreement has it been in writing or not. And the last point, Chairperson, is on IPPs. It was indicated that the adjustments on some of the projects was that, or rather the adjustments was that in the first year, some of the projects were not going to materialize, but others will materialize in the second year. And the question is there a clear process on how are we going to deal with the projects that are going to materialize in the second year? Chair, those are points from my side of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Sithole. Team, Madam Masike, can I request as Thabo and maybe response, because it's clear from a lot of the questions from Madam Masike is because perhaps we may have miscommunicated that the court judgment said this and therefore we did not apply our minds. Maybe if you can even indicate, Mr. Chabalala, in terms of where even what has been taken to court for, what the issue was. And also then to indicate, because then even that talks to the issues of prudency and efficiencies, how we've dealt with those issues. Because I think maybe there may be a miscommunication here. Because all we've done, and maybe let's stress this, that all, how did we deviate from the methodology? Is it what we are calculating informed by the methodology or just a court judgment? As you respond to other things. Madam Masike, over to you and the team.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gumede. Thank you, members, for the questions. I think we should take the questions as in the order that they came in. The first one, Tabisa Wak from Ms. Masetti. Please respond to that.
Thank you, Chairperson. Based on what Ms. Masetti indicated, we'll have to enhance the document to indicate the regulatory stance based on the over-recovery of under this section. So we look at the methodology and enhance the document.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know whether I should also respond to the one from the CEO, since it's also relevant to work.
Mr. Gumede, please guide.
Yes, please. But can I, before you do, I think there is an overarching issue here that is even my comments you guys have not responded to. Mrs. Chotro, what the work is 11%. Eskom did not apply for 11%. Whichever the numbers that we may have different, we may have differed on the extent to which we may have differed. But then it's linked to then the issue, as Madama said to us, saying, well, even if they did not apply for 11%, they applied for this number. There is an element in the methodology that we need to actually talk to, and also then to clarify that issue as asked by the advocate. But I think, Mrs. Chotro, you maybe come in first.
Yeah, Chair, I think even in your guidance right after our presentation, you did guide us. I'm not sure why we're not coming clear about the differences, because there are four different numbers, if I may say, or three maybe at a minimum. The first one is what Eskom has calculated as work. The actual calculating using the CAPM and work formulas. That is different from what we have calculated using the very same formulas. Probably the assumptions will be the difference. And then there is also a number that Eskom has actually applied for, the 1.7%, which is not aligned to how it was calculated. So first of all, we need to compare the two starting numbers, the one that we have calculated using the formula and the one that Eskom has calculated using the formula. That I think that we must just do it as a matter of fact. And then the next one, we then say, what did Eskom apply for? And the reasons for Eskom deviating from what they've calculated. And then we compare it also to what we are actually saying we are proposing as an approval and state the difference. Why are we differing from Eskom? That would actually be covering not just Ms. Masetti, but also Advocate Sithole, because then it shows that there was a thinking process in terms of us coming to the final number that we are proposing. But I think over and above everything, there is an understanding, and it has been something that we have used in the past, and we should be clear about that, that there is the one area that we have not actually argued against between us and Eskom has always been that you can do everything else, do the prudency, do the efficiency and everything, allow the RAP based on the revaluation. However, once you have done that, the one area that we should consider is the area of the work. I think there was always to say that we may have differences in other areas, but on the work, there is that kind of understanding between us and Eskom that is the one number that we are using for smoothing prices. The others are the calculated based on scientific calculations. I think, Tabisa, if we can just respond in that way. And in our own documents, let's really just put it in that way so that we don't have this question. And it does not come as though there was a thumb suck in terms of the number that we came up with or the number that Eskom came up with. We must provide the full reasons for that. Thanks, Chairperson. I think maybe in that way, if Tabisa can respond in that way. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And then we can assist also in the finalization of the RFD to make sure that we respond in detail to that question. Thank you. Tabisa, if you can continue, madam.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Brian, for the explanation. As you have indicated, yes, Eskom, as much as there's been calculated work and also the application of the different number when for the work part, which is 1.7 and 1.58 for the respective years, 2024 and 2025. And then what we have done based on the return, we use the adjusted RAB, and then we calculated the return, which is also different due to the adjustment of the RAB. But the work part, the work percentage has not changed. We've used the numbers as per Eskom's application, and that has been submitted in writing based on the revised numbers that Eskom submitted after the public hearing, and all the comments that have been indicated will be addressed in the revised RFD.
Thank you. Please, Madam Masike, proceed. I think the big issue here is that issue of RAB and taking into account the methodology as well as the issues of prudency and efficiency. Mr. Chabalala.
Okay, do we skip the other questions and go straight to RAB, or?
Because I think that they're actually related, Madam Masike. The issue of efficiency and prudency tests is largely on the asset base. So it's really about what the methodology says and how did we, and to indicate that we are just not driven by the court order, because it comes across here as if the court instructed us to do certain things and we didn't apply our minds, and that is not correct. Am I correct, Mr. Chavala?
Oh no, yes, indeed you are. I think so. Maybe just to explain, maybe
we lost you there, Mr. Chavala. Hey, Madam Masike, you can assist, but we're losing Tabo. Can't hear you.
Okay, let me mute myself and try to find out what's going on. Apologies for that. Or maybe we can go on to the load shedding.
To the load shedding one, yes, please.
Yes,
yeah.
Maybe we should deal with the load shedding between Dr. K and Ms. Magubane. Please assist with the load shedding issues.
Yeah.
Thanks. Probably let me start. And I know a lot of questions from Ms. Masetti were interlinked. So I'll start probably with the accuracy of the assumptions, particularly with reference to the production plan. And I think Dr. Dr. Kondoloy will also talk to the accuracy of the assumptions from the sales side. You'll note that during the processing of this application, during public hearings, as well as the analysis that then proceeded, is that Eskom did make amendments to their applications, and they provided that addendum to take into account the most recent and most realistic information given the time between the initial application and now. And we did get into the analysis where we're looking historically at plant performance and looking at actual numbers where we said, and certainly taking into account the level of load shedding that is in place, to then come to a stance that says the assumptions made are reasonable, because they do take into account our current performance as it stands, and they may even be slightly conservative. So in terms of the level of comfort with the assumptions made, we are quite comfortable, although of course it is not a crystal ball per se that we can satisfy ourselves as far as we can, but what then materializes can be quite different. But the best we can do is make a call based on the information that we have in front of us currently. And then we are also just wanting to highlight, and we'll probably enhance the RFD to talk to that, but also just to highlight that the drivers for the reduction in generation is not only the coal fleet. There's a massive reduction due to the delays in the IPP program. And also to highlight, and we've tried to do this as well in the submission, but we can enhance that to indicate that the cost of load shedding to the economy is a lot more detrimental than the cost of OCGTs, but also taking into account that that does not mean then we can have an uncurbed use of OCGTs, but to highlight that in terms of ensuring that we make a decision that does not force the system operator to load shed, and noting the levels of load shedding that we have now, we wouldn't want to exacerbate that. So what we'll try and do is also then enhance the submission to talk to those and make that comparison in terms of the cost to load shed. I think also we will then look into the improvement targets as guided, to have an analysis around typically what Eskom should be working towards in terms of their plant performance, and we'll make that enhancement. And I've touched already in terms of whether we think the assumptions can be achieved, and we believe that they are as recent as possible, given that they were submitted during the course of processing this application. And I don't know whether, in terms of the load shedding question that Advocate Stolle was asking, it was just to ensure that we're highlighting that we need to ensure that the decision we make in terms of the production plan and linked to the sales does not ensure that load shedding is exacerbated, given its crippling effect on the economy. Thanks.
Thank you. I do believe, though, Ms. Makubane, that it would be useful to also indicate, and maybe also Thabo will indicate this, that what we've done and what maybe we've done in the past, that what we try to do this time is that if something, for instance, in terms of the efficiencies that were asked for, which makes sense that other regulators may require of licensees, unfortunately, if they are not explicitly provided for in our methodology, we've tried to move away from that. We've tried to make sure that anything that is not explicitly provided for in the methodology, although it may look logical, but if it's not in the methodology, we actually don't include that. Madam Spear?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to follow up on the question, the one for Ms. Makubane was talking about the response on the question on load shedding. For me, the issue is the level. Do we have a guidance given to the system operator to say, at this level, then it becomes not financially sustainable to continue utilizing OCGTs and therefore load shedding, because then we will then not have these issues of reopening of the costs by Eskom, because now they are using OCGTs more than what it was planned due to the plant performance, which we all know is deteriorating. So I just wanted to know, is there a level where we say, up to this level, system operator, no, it's unacceptable that we can continue utilizing the OCGTs in the absence, obviously, of international purchases and also in the absence of IPPs, and therefore you utilize OCGTs, or up to this level, you stop, the country goes to load shedding. That's where my understanding, Chair. I just wanted to get from the team to say, is there a guidance on that? Thanks.
Thank you, Madam. I think that's a very clear and very valuable question. Can we respond to that follow-up first, and then Madam Masike, then we can, hopefully you've been able to get hold of Thabo, then he can respond to the whole issue of RAB and prudence test and all that. Can we start with this follow-up?
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Gumede. I think so. Typically, from a tariff and a revenue allowance or decision perspective, how we've dealt with it in the past is that, having analyzed Eskom's application and having seen what is assumed to be available in terms of the generation for that for the year that is being applied for, we then would make a decision as the regulator in terms of what is the level of OCGTs that must be used, and even then it is a level that still ensures that the assumed demand will be met by the approved supply. And so what then happens is that, should Eskom then use more than that when looking at actuals, when they come back in terms of the RCA, we then, as the methodology defines, we then look at the use of OCGTs that is as per design. So the use of it for peaking, for emergencies, and we allow that at diesel cost. And so, to the extent that we find that the additional use is due to the declining coal fleet, we then only allow those volumes at the coal price, or at the price that should have been available due to the plans and assumptions made up front. So typically that is then the level that we allow. It is a level that we have assessed would be sufficient based at application at a time, but also taking into account that what we approve at application time must ensure that the demand is met by the supply that is provided. But in terms of the technical use, or rather as defined by our grid codes, the move from OCGTs to load shed is dependent on the availability of those peaking plants. And so whether or not the system operator ever makes a decision that says, I will load shed as opposed to use diesel because the money is no longer viable, that will be difficult to answer, because it does become a real-time sort of decision that is made. But from a decision perspective, that is the assessment that we make. I hope that answers it, Chair.
Thank you. But Mr. Maybe what I could also add on this one is that, I mean, if you know that the Eskom is applying for 12% load factor for OCGTs, taking into account, for instance, we may all have a wish that the EAF of this plant should be 75%, but they've applied for 58% or 59%, or that number, thereabout. Now, and also there may be an assumption of the response by IPPs, including these short-term power purchase agreements, that also have been taken into account in all of the realities that are there. And based on the sales, the point I want to raise, Madam Massetti, is that unfortunately, the way I understood it, the production plan is influenced by sales and not the other way around. That based on what they are projecting to sell, looking at the available fleet and their EAF and all of that and other plans, they then project that there's going to be this deficit, which they then need to meet in respect by use of OCGTs. So that's what I've understood, that the process starts with sales. And although, as you would say, there's an interactive process, because if you are limited in terms of what you produce, it influences your sales. But primarily the driver is sales, then the production plan, looking at the fleet, what is available, and IPPs and international purchases, all of those things, and STPPs, that then, and also balancing that with in terms of OCGT. That is the plan. But of course, reality will always differ from that plan. So even in terms of the plans that were deemed to have been available at that EAF, some of them become not available, and therefore, although you've now budgeted 12% in terms of OCGT, you may still have load shedding. But what the team is asking is that in terms of what has been requested, we cannot, as the regulator, make a decision that from day one, it says we are budgeting for load shedding. So with the best of, if everything is as applied for, and they've applied for 12%, the assessment says, yes, OCGTs are expensive, but the cost of load shedding is worse than those OCGTs. This is what we are agreeing to, or that's what is being proposed. So I'm hoping that has assisted as well. Mr. Chabalala, is he back? I know we've been at this for over an hour, but I think it's an important enough decision that when we go to the ER, at least the members of the ELS would have been sufficiently engaged on this matter. Please, Mr. Chabalala, or maybe you can assist Mrs. Chota.
Yeah, Chair, I think we've lost Mr. Chabalala. So maybe I can't give the full details.
Oh, no,
but
I'm back, Brian.
Sorry,
oh, thanks, Tabo. Thanks. I was going to chance it, but yeah, thanks for your coming back.
Okay, thank you. I think just without wasting any further time, Mr. Gumede, I think maybe perhaps because we were so brief when we were presenting the RAB section is that we lost some of that value. But just in a nutshell, maybe I'll explain. I think I'm responding around the fact that just because there's that court case, then we did not apply ourselves in terms of ensuring some of that efficiency and prudency in getting to the RAB value. And no, that's not the case. So what we then do is that Eskom has submitted their revaluation, and then us as the NERSA team, we also undertook evaluation on our end. And this is actually done at plant level, whereby we assess the value of each and every plant. In fact, we go as far as synchronizing with Eskom in terms of the number of additional units that have come into play, which units are operational, which ones are not. So we still undertake those efficiency tests and remove units that are not forming part of the fleet. So maybe just to link this directly to the court order is to say that initially what we would do is that after we had assessed the RAB value, we would take it a step further and say, in fact, our previous decision, we took it a step further, and we are still not wrong in that decision we took. So what we did is that after we had assessed the actual RAB value, we went a step further to ask the question to say that, so now these assets that are operating, these assets that are valued at a modern equivalent sort of value, are they operating at that level that which we are expecting from these modern equivalent or new, in inverted commas, assets, And then the decision at the time was to say that, no, these plants are performing dismally, and we need to find a way to compensate back to the customers to say that because these plants are not operating at levels that they are supposed to. That's when the issue around EAF came in, and we started assessing the value of the plant in relation to their performance. However right or wrong that might be, the issue here is that it's not explicit in the methodology. Hence, we end up sort of losing those court cases. So all we are saying is that, yes, we still satisfy ourselves with the value of the RAB, but we do not take it a step further wherein there are areas whereby it's not explicitly stated in the MYPD4 methodology. I hope I've covered you, Mr. Gumet. I'd like to leave it there for now. Thank you.
Maybe talk a little bit about how we ended up with negative numbers in terms of what the difference was, the RCM versus the accumulated debt, depreciation. If you can explain that as well.
The issue around that one was that when Eskom undertakes these re-evaluation exercises, they also they undergo a process of, what do they call them? They call them useful life studies. So you find that at the time we had actually used the original lives of the assets. And then what happens is that there are certain power plants that have actually reached end of life or are operating beyond the original design. So the useful years that we had at the time were actually starting from the original commissioning dates, whereas Eskom, they had been using the revised sort of useful lives, and then that would then end up on our end. You find that we depreciated beyond the useful lives depreciation years. So that's how we ended with those negative figures. But we have since corrected that in these new applications, and that issue is not at play. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that is well covered, colleagues, so that it's quite clear that it wasn't just some kind of error that because we don't understand the numbers, but it was based on the useful lives, and that has since been corrected, and that's where the source of the errors was. And I'm really hoping that, but remembering that the methodology is the one that talks about more than equivalent. It's not just a thumbs up. That's what the MYPD4 methodology talks about, the replacement cost, which is determined using the more than equivalent values. So we unfortunately, by sticking to what the methodology says, it yielded what it yielded. And unfortunately, there was this mismatch in terms of the accumulated depreciation because of the useful life of the assets, but that has since been corrected. But as Thabo was saying, in looking at the prudence, that's when we had tried to use the EAF, but that unfortunately it is not provided for in the methodology, and that has since been corrected. Members, we've taken an hour on this, but I'd kind of let it flow so that at least by the time we go to ER, at least the members of the ELS would have satisfied themselves with the document, which will still be enhanced as Mr. Sichotlo has requested the team. But I'm hoping that members are satisfied with the numbers. The numbers themselves, unfortunately, we can't talk to. They will still need to be, as Mr. Sichotlo has also or Ms. Masiki has indicated, the document itself still needs to go for language editing. That's number one. But I think also there might be, in terms of sanity of numbers, there needs to be some kind of sanity check, especially when we add back all of the other the other RCAs, because the decision that NERSA will make in the end of November has to take into account the RCAs as well as the 69 billion rand. So, members, with that, I'm hoping that we are satisfied with the presentation and the numbers. We are way over time, but if we are, I would like us to take us to a decision that is requested of us, and it is a recommendation to ER. And I assume that because there are no further hands, it is a pity that we've lost Mr. Pukula as well as Mr. Nkiza, because this would have been very useful if all of the members of ELS would have satisfied themselves with this before this matter goes to ER. So can I take you to a decision? Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll back to the decision. By the way, Madam Masike, that decision is on page?
It's on page 8 to 10 of 707, sir.
Okay, thank you, Madam. So the decision, members, that is sort of us, that we recommend to ER. Those numbers that are there in the tables, we can't talk to the numbers at this stage, but more to the principles that have been discussed. So by show of hands, members, if we are comfortable with that, with all of the updates that the team will actually provide to the RFD. By show of hands, members, would you be comfortable to recommend to ER? Thank you, Madam Massetti. Yes, Madam Massetti. Yes, Madam.
Chairperson, it was clear from my substantive comments I made that there will be areas that require some, some enhancements in terms of the yes, and also even areas where we may need to pronounce on the on the areas for improvements to set some targets to a certain extent. And so that there is performance incentives that we communicate out there, Chairperson, so that it is not business as usual. I mean, there's a lot at stake, Chairperson, in terms of the increases that the public is likely to see here, Chairperson. So there is a lot that the regulator needs to do, and that must also come out of the decision and even in the analysis on the RFDs, so that one can see how we have arrived at what we believe should be the focus and the effort that Eskom must undertake or embark in improving going forward, Chairperson. I think that is very important. But I do want to emphasize, Chairperson, as I support this, that it is important that we do reflect to the massive load shedding that we are seeing, because it will have an impact in the usage of the OCGTs. It will be of no value for us not to to preempt the reality of the figures that we have before us today, knowing that the situation is such that we are enduring massive periods of load shedding as we speak. So that aspect for me, Chairperson, I believe it is very important that it be reflected, because we're looking at the assumptions for the cost that are to be incurred in the future, and we are entering the financial year knowing that when the plant performance is very bad and it forces Eskom to utilize the OCGTs. If that kind of analysis does not find itself in this in the RFDs, I would worry, Chairperson, and it must also be reflected also in the somewhat in the decision that we are going to take, Chairperson. I would like to just make that input and that emphasis, Chair, as I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. And clearly that the enhancements, as members have indicated, they need to be made. And also, as indicated, we do need to emphasize some of the requirements. Although maybe the methodology may not be explicit on them, on those issues that we may require Eskom to do, but clearly we need to indicate that as a responsible regulator. But I think you have indicated support. And I was, members, if we can maybe just show by show of hands again. Unfortunately, I did see the hands earlier, but just to confirm, for Mr. Dlamini, Madam Spear, Advocate Sitole, Madam Maseti, I also support. So unfortunately, there's 4 of us left now. So Mr. Mavuso, you've got your decision, and I apologize. I know we are already an hour over time, members. I think if you can just bear with us. I know these discussions are very difficult. If you can just bear with us, members, so we can then conclude this, if you don't mind. We did say item 15 is withdrawn, but then there are these applications for generation licenses, which are reflected under item 16. If we can go to that, members. And I'd like to have I have a request in terms of all of the applications for licenses that have been, there has been a request from the IPP office on some of these applications that I'd like to put to members at the end. Mr. Mavuso, item 16.
Yes, Chair. Kotats will take this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Be as brief as you can, please. We are way over time anyway.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to recommend to the Energy Regulator that these 3 bid window 5 private bidders listed in Table 2 of the submission be issued with the generation licenses. Chair, the issuing of this license is delegated to the Energy Regulator. The Electricity Subcommittee is required to recommend for approval by the Energy Regulator as per clause 1.1 of the delegation matrix. Chair, these applicants, namely Grootfontein PV1, Grootfontein PV2, Grootfontein PV3 P2 Ltd, are part of the 25 bid window 5 preferred bidders. On the 31st of March, the energy regulator approved that the 22 preferred bidders be issued with their generation licenses. These applicants were not processed due to the failure to advertise on the newspapers. The applicants duly went through a public participation process after they were advised to go through the public participation process. These applications were analyzed and were found to comply with the requirements of licensing. No objections were received when the applicant advertised and no when NERSA advertised for the public hearing. Chair, the recommendations are on page 7 and 8 of the submission, paragraph 14. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you for the presentation. Members, and I'm noting the request by Madam Massetti for 1:30 finish. I'm hoping to target that, although we still have that item 19. Can I then, by show of hands, members, if you've got any comments on this presentation? Any questions, comments? If not, can we then, by show of hands, perhaps then see if we can adopt those recommendations, which is basically the ELS is requested to recommend to ER for the granting of those licenses. Thank you, Madam Massetti. Thank you, Ms. Sibia. Advocate, would you be comfortable? Thank you, Advocate. I'll also support the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mavoso. That matter has been dealt with. If we can then go to item, the other license application on 17, please.
Yes, Chair, this one will be presented by Chisilo. It's the exchange trading license. Thanks very much. Chisilo, please come in.
Good afternoon, Chair and the members and also colleagues. I'll take this matter as read, Chair. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to recommend to the energy regulator to approve the Energy Exchange Southern Africa Pty Ltd application for a trading license. Chair, this matter is duly delegated to the ELS for the purpose of recommending to the energy regulator for approval. Chair, this application duly went a public participation process. Chair, we therefore recommend the recommendation as they are set out in section 14 of this submission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mwanza. Members, any question and comment on this one? There was a public process on this. Madam Smia.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to the presenter. Just a small issue. On section 4, it says they were formed in 2017 for trading within South Africa, but they are now only getting a license now. So what were they doing from 2017 until now? Were they not trading?
Thank you, Madam. Chisilo.
Thank you, Chair. I think we will enhance that paragraph to put it in a proper context. The company was established in 2017 with the goal to become a trader. However, with the nature of trading, looking for a generator and also customers, perhaps that delayed their realization of their goal as a trader. Thank you.
Thank you. So, basically, the clear answer, Madam Speaker, that they were not trading. They were still trying to establish for the purposes of being able to apply. So they needed to establish both supply and demand. I see your hand, Advocate.
Chair, yes, just a minor enhancements. I think under authority chairperson, we cannot say that it falls delegated. We need to say it falls within the authority of the energy regulator. Thanks.
Okay, for some reason you were breaking on my side. I'm hoping that the team had your input.
Yes, Chair, it's under paragraph 3. It's just as I said, it's a point of enhancements. The energy regulator cannot delegate. This cannot fall within the delegated authority of the energy regulator. It falls within the authority of the energy regulator. I was just saying, let's enhance that because the regulator cannot delegate to itself. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you. I've seen this in a number of applications. So thanks for clarifying in terms of how it should be stated. It's not delegated authority; it's under the authority of the regulator. It doesn't delegate to itself. So, Mr. Mavuso, going forward, please can we just make sure that we can write that properly going forward. Thank you, members. Any other comments, questions? If not, can I then take us to the decision that is sought? The decision is actually under recommendation, which is on page 7. It starts on page 6 of 287, and spills over to page 7. So, members, by show of hands, can we recommend that to the energy regulator? All of those approvals. Thank you, Advocate. Thank you, Ms. Leah. Madam Assetti. Are you comfortable? Thank you, Madam. I also support. So, Mr. Mwanza, you've got your decision. If I'm not, I think if I'm correct, this brings us to the end of the open session. It's taken a whole lot longer than I thought it would, but we'd like to thank the members of the public that may have stayed with us throughout the duration. It's been a marathon run, as Madam Assetti has indicated. We have not taken a break either. I was hoping that considering that people may want to have the session finished, that perhaps we'll push as far as we can. But we'd like to thank all members of public, members of the regulator, members of staff for this engagement on these items that were put before us. I thank you, and Mr. Matera, you can now stop the live streaming.